Hey, Reddit. I never thought I'd be one of those people airing out their dirty laundry online, but I need to get this out. My story's not some dramatic Hollywood blockbuster or a soap opera. It's my real, fucked up life. If you've ever had your heart ripped out, then you know what I'm talking about. This is about betrayal, revenge, and maybe a little bit of stupidity on my part. But it's all true. Every word. Let me just cut to the chase. My wife cheated on me for money. Not for love, not for passion, just for cold, hard cash. She hooked up with some guy because he could give her the things I couldn't. Expensive things, luxury shit. And looking back, I feel like a complete idiot for not seeing it sooner. I mean, she played me, and I let her. But let me start at the beginning. My name doesn't really matter for now, but let's just say I'm your average guy. I work in IT. Nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills. I've always dreamed of breaking out of the corporate grind, starting my own business. Something in tech, maybe an app, maybe some kind of IT consulting. Just making a name for myself. But dreams take money, and I didn't have a lot of that lying around. I guess that's where some of the problems started. Enter Emma, my wife. Or should I say, my ex-wife now. Emma's the kind of woman who turns heads when she walks into a room. Picture this. Long, dark hair that always seemed to fall perfectly in place, a smile that could melt ice, and a body that'd make most men lose their train of thought. She knew she was beautiful, and she used it. Trust me, she fucking used it. When we met, I thought I was the luckiest guy alive. She seemed perfect, fun, smart, and yeah, she had expensive taste, but I figured, who doesn't want nice things, right? At first, it was small stuff. A designer handbag here, some overpriced shoes there. I didn't think much of it because, honestly, I thought I was the problem. Like, maybe I just wasn't making enough, and I should work harder. But as time went on, I started to notice more. She wasn't just into fashion. She was obsessed with it. She had this thing for high-end luxury brands. The kind of shit you see in celebrity Instagram feeds. She'd talk about how she deserved to have the best because, well, she looked the best. In her mind, beauty wasn't just a gift, it was a fucking currency. And I didn't realize that until it was too late. Now, don't get me wrong, I wasn't broke. We weren't struggling to put food on the table or anything like that. We had a decent apartment, we went on the occasional vacation, but I wasn't rolling in cash either. My job was steady, and I was doing well for myself, but I wasn't making the kind of money to buy $1,500 smartphones and $600 blouses every other month. And that's where the tension started. We'd argue about money, but not in the let's sit down and figure this out kind of way. It was more like she'd make these passive-aggressive comments like, it'd be nice if we could take a real vacation for once. Like, somewhere exotic. Or, oh, I saw this amazing dress today. It'd look so good on me, but I guess I'll just wait until we can afford it. It drove me insane. I was busting my ass at work, trying to save for our future, and here she was treating life like some luxury shopping spree she was missing out on. I tried to explain to her that we needed to live within our means, but she'd just get quiet. That kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're failing, like you're not good enough. I started picking up extra work where I could. Freelance gigs, side jobs, anything to make more money. I had this idea for a tech startup that I thought could really take off, but we were stuck in this financial loop. Every time I tried to save, something came up. Usually, it was her wanting something new. It was like she had a bottomless appetite for shit we didn't need. The first real red flag? The phone. We were having dinner one night, nothing special, just some pasta and wine at our tiny kitchen table. Her phone was sitting there, right next to her plate, and I reached over for the bread or something, I don't even remember. As I stretched my hand toward the middle of the table, she quickly snatched up her phone like it was a grenade about to go off. I froze. It was such a weird reaction. You got something to hide? I asked, half joking, but I was dead serious. She gave me this look, this cold, hard look that I'd never seen before. No, she said, flat and defensive. Everyone's allowed to have their own space. You don't need to touch my stuff. That didn't sit right with me at all. We'd never had secrets between us before. At least, I didn't think we did. But that night, I realized something had shifted. Something was wrong, and I didn't know what it was. From then on, Her phone was like a vault. She started carrying it everywhere, even to the bathroom. And not just carrying it, clutching it, like she was afraid it'd spill her secrets the second I got near it. I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband who goes through his wife's phone. But something was eating at me. One day, when she was at work, I decided to try my luck. I found her phone on the kitchen counter, and I picked it up, heart pounding in my chest like I was about to defuse a bomb. Locked. Of course, it was locked. And it wasn't just her usual passcode. No, she had changed it. I didn't know what to do with that anger. I put the phone back, trying to act like nothing had changed, but inside, I knew everything had. Then came the handbag. You know how people say the devil's in the details? Well, in this case, the devil was in a fucking handbag. She had this new purse she'd been parading around, telling me it was a really good fake that she'd gotten online. But one day, curiosity got the better of me. I was sitting alone in the apartment, staring at that bag like it was mocking me. I grabbed it and started Googling. Turns out, that really good fake was an original. $3,000 retail. I couldn't believe it. I sat there on the couch, phone in hand, looking up every detail of that brand, checking serial numbers, stitching patterns, the whole deal. There was no doubt. It was real. And that's when everything started to click. The phone, the clothes, the shoes, all of it. She wasn't buying knockoffs. She wasn't getting this stuff with her paycheck either. Someone else was paying for it. I confronted her about it that night. Is this bag real? I asked her, holding it up like Exhibit A in a courtroom. She didn't miss a beat. No, of course not. It's a really good copy. You can't even tell the difference, can you? But this time, I wasn't buying her bullshit. I knew the truth. She was lying to my face, and I felt like a complete idiot for believing her all this time. But I didn't let it turn into a fight. Not yet. I wasn't ready. I needed more than just a hunch. I needed proof. And when I found it, well, things were going to get a lot worse before they got better. This was just the beginning. I didn't know how deep this rabbit hole went, but I was about to find out. So, here's where things start getting real. After that whole handbag incident, I knew I couldn't just let things slide anymore. I couldn't sit there and keep pretending everything was normal while my wife, Emma, the woman I thought I knew, was out there lying to my face. But I didn't want to confront her without knowing all the facts. I needed to catch her in the act, so to speak. One morning, I got a day off, but Emma didn't know that. She was up early, dressed in one of her perfectly put-together outfits, makeup on point, ready to head to work, or so she said. That's when the idea hit me. Why not follow her? If she was lying to me, I'd catch her in the act. I figured, worst-case scenario, she'd actually be going to work and I'd be wrong. But something told me she wasn't. She kissed me goodbye like usual, grabbed her bag, and walked out the door. I waited a few minutes, just to make sure she wouldn't suspect anything, and then I followed. I kept my distance as she walked down the street, but my heart was pounding like I was in some kind of spy movie. My hands were sweating, and my mind was racing with a million thoughts. What if she really wasn't going to work? What if she was meeting someone else? What if? Then it happened. She didn't go to her job. In fact, she didn't even head in that direction. I followed her for about 10 minutes, but then I lost her. She got into a taxi, and before I could catch the plate number or follow closely enough, it sped off. I stood there, watching the taillights disappear, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I wasn't about to give up that easily, though. I decided to head to her workplace and ask around. When I got there, I saw one of the employees I'd seen a few times before. She recognized me too, probably from the occasional office party or when I'd pick Emma up. I tried to play it cool, asking if Emma was around or maybe on break. That's when the bomb dropped. "Oh, she doesn't work here anymore," the woman said casually, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "What do you mean?" I stammered, trying to keep my voice steady. "She hasn't worked here for at least 3 months. I thought you knew." My heart nearly stopped. 3 months? Emma had been leaving for work every morning like clockwork. And for 3 months, she hadn't even had a job? I felt like I'd just been sucker punched. I thanked the woman and left the office, my mind spinning in 1,000 different directions. The anger bubbling inside me was white hot. I wanted to go home, wait for her, and tear her a new one. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust. She'd been lying to me every single day. On the way home, I couldn't keep it bottled up any longer. I called my best friend, Matt, and told him everything. I was pissed, and I wasn't thinking clearly. "I'm done with this, Matt," I said, gripping the steering wheel. "I'm going to confront her tonight. She has no idea what's coming." But Matt, being the level-headed guy he is, talked me down. "Dude, don't do anything rash," he said. "You realize your marriage is hanging by a thread, right? If you go in guns blazing, you might never find out the whole truth. What if there's more going on than you think?" He had a point, as much as I hated to admit it. If I blew up now, I might never find out who she was really seeing or why she was lying. And honestly, I wasn't ready to throw in the towel without getting the full story. "I need your help," I told him. "I need to figure out what's going on." Matt agreed, and we made a plan. The next day, I pretend to go to work like usual, but instead, Matt and I would tail her together. He had a better car for this kind of thing anyway. Tinted windows, smooth ride, no one would suspect a thing. So that's what we did. I got up, dressed for work, kissed Emma goodbye like nothing was wrong, and walked out the door. But instead of heading to my office, I met Matt at the corner, hopped into his car, and we followed her. She took a taxi again, and this time we kept up. She didn't head to some cheap motel or a friend's place. Nope. The taxi took her to one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the city. We're talking gated communities, million-dollar houses, the kind of place where people don't just have a nice car. They have several. Emma got out of the taxi, glanced around like she was making sure no one was watching, and walked up to one of those fancy houses. Here's the kicker. She didn't knock or ring the doorbell. She pulled out a key and unlocked the door like she owned the place. Matt and I stayed parked on the street, watching. The house was huge, and it had the kind of driveway that screamed money. We sat there all day, waiting, trying to make sense of what we were seeing. The sun was setting when the door finally opened again, and Emma stepped out. This time, she wasn't alone. A man followed her. Tall, well-dressed, probably in his mid-40s, and everything about him screamed wealthy. He had his arm around her like they were a couple, like they were used to each other's touch. That's when Matt pulled out his phone and snapped a photo of the guy. "Let's see who this asshole is," Matt muttered as we started Googling the guy's face. It didn't take long. Turns out, the man walking arm in arm with my wife was some big-time businessman. A real estate mogul, if you can believe it. He was all over the internet. Articles, interviews, charity galas, the works. And the icing on the cake? We found his Instagram profile. There were plenty of pictures of him, all right? But none of them were with Emma. Nope. His Instagram was full of photos with a completely different woman. His wife. I felt like I was going to be sick. There it was, right in front of me. The proof I'd been dreading. My wife, the woman I'd been living with, sleeping next to, planning a future with, had been living a double life. And this guy? He wasn't just some random fling. He was married too. Matt and I sat there in silence, the weight of everything sinking in. We knew we couldn't act yet. Not without more. I had to go home, pretend like everything was fine, like I hadn't just watched my wife walk out of another man's house. I couldn't blow up. Not yet. I told Matt we'd deal with it tomorrow. We'd have to. But tonight, I had to keep my cool. I had to go home and play dumb like I was none the wiser. So that's what I did. I went home, walked through the door, and kissed her like nothing had changed. But deep down, I knew everything had. After the shock of what I had seen the previous day, I couldn't let it go. The image of Emma walking out of that house with another man, all smiles, haunted me. My brain was working overtime. I knew I had to do something, but what? Blowing up at Emma didn't seem like the right move. Not yet. I needed more information. That's when I got an idea. The businessman. I couldn't stop thinking about him. His face, his profile, his life on display for the world to see, but with a wife who wasn't Emma. I went back to his Instagram page and started scrolling through his photos again. Pictures of his life of luxury, trips to exotic locations, fine dining, but always with his actual wife by his side. She was beautiful too, not in the flashy, materialistic way Emma was, but in a more understated, elegant way. It didn't take long to find her. She was in several of his photos and her account was tagged. I clicked on her profile. It was private, but that didn't matter. I wasn't interested in snooping through her posts. I had a more direct approach in mind. I sat there for a few minutes, wondering how to phrase the message. I knew this wasn't going to be easy for her, and I didn't want to come off like a complete psycho. So I kept it simple. Hi, I'm reaching out because I have some important information about your husband. I'd rather not say too much over a message. Can we meet? I think it's something you'd want to know, and we can do it in a public place, whatever makes you feel comfortable. I hit send and waited, unsure if she'd even respond. But she did. It didn't take long. Within an hour, she replied, agreeing to meet the next day at a busy cafe downtown. The next day, I arrived early, nerves buzzing through me. I wasn't sure what to expect from this meeting. Would she be angry? Would she not believe me? But when she walked in, she was calm, composed. She had that same quiet grace about her that I'd seen in her photos. We sat down, exchanged some polite small talk, and then I told her everything. I didn't hold anything back. How I had followed Emma, the house, the photos, the fact that her husband was cheating on her with my wife. She listened, not showing much emotion at first. When I finished, she took a deep breath and said, I need to check this out for myself. Give me your number, and I'll be in touch. She didn't seem surprised or devastated. It was like she had been expecting this, or at least wasn't shocked that her husband could be capable of it. She stood up, thanked me for telling her, and left, leaving me sitting there wondering if I had done the right thing. A week passed. It was the hardest week of my life. I had to act like nothing was wrong at home, like I was still the clueless husband, while in reality, I knew everything. Emma was still going to work every day, but now I knew exactly where she was going. Each time she kissed me goodbye, it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. Then a week later, I got the call. It was her. Can you come to my house? She asked. Her voice was calm, almost too calm, and I knew something was up. I agreed, and later that day, I found myself pulling up to her place. A huge, elegant home, far nicer than the apartment Emma and I shared. She greeted me at the door, and as I stepped inside, she led me to the living room. There was a bottle of wine on the table, 2 glasses, but I could tell this wasn't just a casual conversation. I hired a detective, she said, getting straight to the point. He confirmed what you told me. My husband has been renting that house for months, meeting your wife there. And he's been buying her expensive things, jewelry, clothes, phones. The whole lot. She poured herself a glass of wine, took a long sip, and looked me in the eye. I'm going to ruin him, she said, her voice cold and matter-of-fact. He thinks he can get away with this, but he has no idea who he's dealing with. I could feel the weight of her words. This wasn't a woman who was going to sit back and let her husband walk all over her. She had a plan, and it wasn't going to end well for him. She finished her wine and refilled the glass. Then she turned to me, sizing me up for a moment. Do you want some wine? She asked, and I nodded. I wasn't about to refuse. I needed something to take the edge off, and maybe we both did. We talked for a while after that. She told me about her life, how her father had started the business her husband now ran. Her father was wealthy and powerful, the kind of man whose name opened doors and closed others. She didn't mention his name outright, and I got the feeling it was better that way. This was a woman who had been born into power and privilege, and she knew how to use it. We had a few drinks, and the conversation flowed more easily after that. She was smart, sharp, and honestly a little intimidating. But then, without any pretense or build-up, she asked me something I wasn't expecting. Do you want to have sex? It wasn't flirtatious or seductive. It was just a question, plain and simple. I stared at her for a moment, caught off guard, but then I realized I didn't need to think too hard about my answer. Yes, I said. The next hour or so was a blur of heat and intensity. She was an experienced woman. There was no doubt about that. She knew exactly what she wanted, and she took it. There wasn't any guilt or shame, no hesitation. It felt almost transactional in a way, but I didn't care. I was too caught up in the moment, in the escape from everything that had been crushing me. When it was over, I left her house, feeling strangely satisfied. Not just from the sex, but from the fact that for once I felt like I had control over something in this mess. She wasn't just some scorned wife. She was a woman on a mission, and I was a part of that now, whether I liked it or not. When I got home that night, after everything that had happened with the businessman's wife, I couldn't keep pretending anymore. The moment I stepped through the door, I knew it was time to confront Emma. I didn't care about playing it cool, not after everything I'd seen, not after what she'd done. I slammed the door shut behind me, and the sound must have startled her because she turned to look at me with this wide-eyed expression, like she knew what was coming. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low but shaking with anger. She barely looked up from her phone, still scrolling, still acting like nothing was wrong. But I wasn't having it. I walked straight up to her and threw it all out there. "I know everything," I said, my voice rising. "I know about the businessman, about the house, about the lies. You think I'm that stupid? You're a fucking fool if you think I wouldn't find out." That got her attention. She dropped her phone and stood up, her face twisting into something between anger and disgust. But she didn't even try to deny it. "So what?" she snapped. "I don't need you. I haven't needed you for a long time. You're just some placeholder. He's the one who's providing for me now. He loves me. He's going to leave his wife, and we're going to be together." The audacity of it all hit me like a freight train. She was standing there, telling me, proudly telling me, that she had been waiting for him to dump his wife for her. It was pathetic. "You really think he's going to leave his wife for you?" I asked, laughing bitterly. "You're delusional." She glared at me, arms crossed, like she couldn't believe I wasn't bowing down to her fantasy. "He will," she insisted. "You'll see. I'm filing for divorce," I said, my voice dead serious. "You can go live in your little dream world, but I'm done with this. We're done." She scoffed. "Good. You should have done that a long time ago." And just like that, she grabbed her bag, threw a few things into it, and walked out the door without another word. No apologies, no remorse, just cold indifference. But she had no idea what was about to hit her in a few days. A few days later, everything fell apart for her and her beloved businessman. His wife, no, that woman, the one with the quiet power, wasn't just sitting around after our conversation. She was planning her revenge. With the help of her father, she dismantled her husband's business, leaving him without a thread to his name. I heard bits and pieces through the grapevine, but I didn't care enough to dig into the details. All I knew was that Emma's little fantasy life crumbled just as quickly as it had started. As for me, I filed for divorce, and the process moved faster than I expected. Emma didn't fight it. Why would she? She had already moved on, or so she thought. Then, out of the blue, I got another call from the businessman's wife. She invited me to visit her again. I didn't know what to expect, but I went. When I arrived, she poured me a glass of wine, and we sat in her living room. "So," she said, looking at me with a calm, calculating expression, "what do you want in exchange for all this information?" At first, I told her I didn't want anything. I was just glad to see the truth come to light. But then I thought about it. I had been stuck in a dead-end job for so long, and I did have an idea that I'd been sitting on for a while. "There is one thing," I said. "I have a startup idea. It's still rough, but it has potential." She listened carefully, but when I finished explaining, she shook her head. "No," she said flatly. "Not like this. Come back tomorrow with a solid plan." I didn't waste any time. I spent the entire night working on my idea, refining it, turning it into something real. The next day, when I went back to her house, she wasn't alone. There was another man with her, a business analyst. He listened to my pitch, asked a few questions, and then he turned to her and whispered something. She nodded slowly, then turned to me. "All right," she said, "I'll invest, but I want 35% of the business if it becomes profitable." I was stunned. I knew she was powerful, but I didn't think she'd actually take me seriously. This was more than I had ever hoped for. I agreed to her terms without hesitation. And now, here I am, writing this while putting together a team to get my startup off the ground. I can't go into details yet, but I know it's going to be profitable. I can feel it. Funny how things turn out, huh? What started as the worst period of my life is turning into something that could change everything for me. Thank you, Reddit, for letting me get this all out. Sometimes life takes you down a road you never expected, but maybe that's the point. You don't always know what's waiting on the other side. Update, it's been about a year since everything went down, and looking back, it feels like a lifetime ago. I'm sitting here in my office. Yeah, my office, writing this update, and I can't help but feel a mix of pride and disbelief at how much my life has changed. Things are good, really good, and I owe a lot of that to the lessons I learned during the darkest time of my life. Let me start with the business. The startup I mentioned, it took off faster than I ever expected. The woman who invested in me, the businessman's ex-wife, kept her word. She gave me the capital I needed, and I built a team that believed in the vision I had. It wasn't easy. Those first few months were brutal. Late nights, endless meetings, tweaking the product until it was perfect, but it all paid off. The business now is thriving. We've got a steady stream of clients, and we're growing at a rate I didn't think possible when I was just dreaming about this idea. And before you ask, my relationship with her, the investor, it's strictly business. She's a sharp woman, no nonsense, and she keeps everything professional. We meet regularly, but it's always about the company. There are no hidden agendas, no awkward moments, nothing like what happened between us that first time. We both moved on, and it works. Now let's talk about the fun part, my ex-wife Emma. Yeah, she came crawling back. I didn't think she would, not after how things ended between us. But once news started spreading about my business doing well, she suddenly remembered I existed. It started with a message. Simple at first, just a hey, how have you been? Like she hadn't blown up our life and walked out the door for some other guy. I didn't respond. Then the messages started piling up. Longer, more desperate. She started hinting at how much she missed me, how she made a mistake, how she didn't realize what she had until it was gone. Classic, right? The cherry on top was when she called me one evening, trying to sound sweet and remorseful. She said all the things you'd expect. I still care about you. We had something special. Maybe we could start over. But the truth is, she didn't give a damn about me. She just saw the money, the success, and thought she could slither back into my life like nothing had happened. I let her talk for a bit, then I just told her to go to hell. Flat out. I don't know if she expected me to say that, but the silence on the other end of the line told me all I needed to know. I hung up and never looked back. Let her live in the mess she created. But enough about her. There's someone new in my life now. I met this girl a few months ago. Let's call her Sarah. She's different. No drama, no baggage, no hidden motives. We met in the most random way at a friend's party, and we just clicked. She's funny, smart, down-to-earth, and she doesn't give a damn about the material stuff. She doesn't know about my business yet, at least not the details. I've been keeping that part of my life under wraps, not because I don't trust her, but because I want to make sure she's with me for me, not for the money or the success. We've been spending a lot of time together, and yeah, I'm really starting to like her. It's nice, actually, being with someone who doesn't expect anything from me except for honesty and just being myself. It's refreshing after everything I've been through. I'm not in any rush to tell her about the business. Maybe one day, when it feels right. But for now, I'm enjoying just getting to know her without any of the complications. So, that's where I'm at now. A year ago, I was stuck in the middle of the worst period of my life, with everything falling apart around me. And now I'm running a successful business, surrounded by people who believe in what we're building. I've got my life back, and I've got something more, hope for the future. I want to end this by thanking everyone who's been reading this, who's been following my story. Sometimes life throws you into situations that seem impossible to survive, but trust me, if I can get through it, so can you. Believe in yourself, in your ability to come out stronger, and never let anyone take away your worth. Success isn't just about money or power. It's about learning from the pain, moving forward, and becoming the best version of yourself. I learned that the hard way, but I'm grateful for the lessons, as brutal as they were. To anyone reading this, Whether you're in the middle of your own mess or just trying to figure things out, keep going. Believe in the best, and don't let anyone tell you that you don't deserve it. Thank you, Reddit, for being there through it all.
My cheating wife panicked when I showed up instead of her affair partner, unveiling her double life. My friend Frank was picking me up for a 4-day hunting trip, so I said goodbye to my wife. Frank packed his truck with all his hunting gear. Preparation was essential for success. He uncovered the truck bed and opened a drawer behind the cab. "Put your rifle here," he said, pointing to the box. I placed my rifle in the gear inside. I got into the cab and glanced back at the house. The door was closed. Frank drove to an old family cabin now managed by his Uncle Bob, who couldn't get around anymore, so Frank took care of it. "He's made major improvements," Frank said, "like better insulation and a more efficient wood stove, so we won't need parkas all the time this season." He added a satellite dish for TV and internet. Frank continued, "There's no reliable cell coverage, but you can use WhatsApp over Wi-Fi if you want to call Maeve. She doesn't expect a lot of contact." I replied, "And I like being out of touch, so I won't mention the internet." We watched Sports Center during dinner. Later, I read a John Sanford novel while Frank used his laptop. We were sipping our second beers of the evening. We weren't just out for a drunken boys trip. We wanted to test ourselves against nature and hopefully get some venison. "Oh crap," Frank suddenly exclaimed. I closed my book, looking at him. Frank's eyes were glued to the screen as he scrolled. "Holy double crap," he said, then looked at me with doubt on his face. I bookmarked my page. "What's up?" Frank, was he reading the news? Did something happen to Maeve? His voice dropped. "Oh crap, you need to see this." He turned the laptop toward me. I got up, crossed the room, and sat down. I expected a terrible headline, but it wasn't a news site. It was a social network. On the screen was a picture of Maeve smiling. I always thought her smile looked evil. I looked at Frank. "What the hell is this?" "Sorry, Matt, it's a dating site," he replied helplessly. "A dating site?" I couldn't believe it. After Tracy and I broke up, I was in a bad place for months. I did nothing. Eventually, I started using Tinder and other sites to meet women. I stared at him. Some of these sites skip dating and go straight to hookups. Frank lightened up. "I did get lucky a few times, but there are wives on there too." "Wives?" "Yes, some wives and many husbands looking for fun on the side." I looked back at the screen. Another picture of my wife appeared. My gut clenched. Look, Matt, I've seen a lot of fake profiles. They use women's names and images without their knowledge. Maeve might be a sufferer. I've never seen her on these sites before. I hoped that was true. As I examined the profile, the photos were definitely of Maeve. Had they been hacked? One detail stabbed me in the heart, the outfit in one photo. I bought it for her last Christmas. The picture was less than a year old and I didn't take it. I started reading, "Can you help me with my daddy issues?" And I don't mean sugar daddy. I think my dad has always want to, but he hasn't yet. I think about what it would be like sometimes. I imagine my dad now, middle-aged but still hot. Sometimes I picture him young. I even imagine a viral, retired man. Daddy's girl would be happy to help, so if you're clean and fit the description, please send a photo. I'm alone for the long weekend and would love some engaging daddy-daughter time. Below the profile was a box reading, "Current status closing soon." I looked at Frank. "Daddy issues? What the hell?" "Maybe this is good," Frank said quickly, seeing my reaction. "Some cheating wives aren't unhappy with their husbands. They just have fantasies they're uncomfortable sharing, and maybe it's about trying something new, or they have daddy fantasies." Frank shrugged. I read further, feeling a lump in my throat. Frank said, "You found double crap indeed. Dad's family is from Greece and Italy, so he has a classic Mediterranean look. Dark eyes, dark curly hair, a strong nose with a slight Roman hump. If that's you, I'm looking forward to a daddy-daughter date. If you're 6 feet 5 inches tall with the build of a long-distance runner, it'll be a hot date." "What? What?" Frank responded. "I thought you knew, but clearly you didn't. Not a clue, man, not a clue." We were both confused. Ma's father, Sean, is a pale-skinned Irishman with rust-brown hair. The description fit me, not him. Then I reached the triple crap. Under Ma's profile was a box that said, "Join the chat room." I scrolled through the messages and saw one that struck me. "Hi, I've had a lot of free time this month. Do you have a place for me?" Maeve replied, "Oh yes, I can make room. Let me know when I can see you again. Did you have a good time last month?" "Screw me," I said, stunned. "She's been doing this for a while." I looked at Frank. "Can you tell how long she's been on this site? Maybe she's doing it for money?" I recoiled, half expecting to see Maeve on a live feed. Frank took the last step and navigated the site. "As far as I know, it's just a dating site. It's not set up like she's running a business. It looks like she's doing this for fun, he continued. She thought once would be enough. I growled. If it really was only once, she's having a whole weekend while I'm away. Whoa, Matt. It's a pop-up site for speed dating, not long-term relationships. Make a date with her, I said. What? Swipe right or whatever and see if she's available this weekend. I want to know if she's really having fun while I'm up here. I could try, he said reluctantly, but I don't fit the description. She wants to see a picture. It hit me. She wants a picture of me. I told Frank my idea to set her up using my picture. He thought it was a good idea. I reminded him it was too late. I could still ruin her fun by writing in the chat room that I'm coming home with a rifle. Frank said it was best not to warn her. She said she's free Friday and Sunday, so she'll make a date for then. Frank and I had taken Friday and Monday off to maximize our hunting time, so I wasn't expected home until Monday afternoon. If you text her now, she'll have time to get her lies together. His voice tinged with anger, and I remembered his wife Tracy had left him for her boss. If we go now, you'll catch her in person with proof. He grinned as he looked at Ma's profile. It was a little over 3 hours home. We discussed our options, preparing May for our arrival, following her to her dates and catching her daddy. The most serious topic was the inevitable divorce. Frank's experience with divorce law was painful, but it would help me. 2 hours later, we were on our third repeat of plans, driving mostly in silence. We pulled onto my street around 10:45. Frank slowing down in front of my house. I told Frank, keep going. He glared but pressed the gas. Turn the corner and stop, I commanded. He did, then looked at me again. There's a car parked across from our house. I don't recognize it. No one parks on the street here at night. She's already started, and she's doing it in our house. I reached for the door. Thanks, buddy. You can leave. Screw it, man. We have a plan. We either check it out together or we leave and deal with it tomorrow. No, I need to know now, I insisted. Come on, Matt. If she's alone, it won't prove anything, and you'll still be messed up. I need to know, I repeated. Okay, plan B, he said, driving to the alley behind my house. Frank spoke forcefully. Whether she's alone or not, we look around then go to my place. My divorce taught me to think hard before reacting, he added, figuratively speaking, remembering my rifle in the truck. Of course, I thought. Frank parked, and we walked silently towards my house, staying in the shadows. I lifted the alley gate lever, hoping Ma forgot to lock it after taking out the trash. She had. We slipped inside. Our bedroom was in the back corner of the house. We saw a faint light behind the curtains. Moving quietly to avoid the leaves, we reached the larger window. I tried to peek inside, but the curtain blocked the view. Frank shook his head. I moved closer, and saw a gap in the curtain. Peeking through, I saw Maeve and an older man on the bed. I almost smashed the window, but remembered my Leatherman tool. I reached for it, but felt Frank's hand stopping me. He signaled for silence and pulled me away. I resisted, but eventually fell back. Frank threw his hands up, walked to the gate, and I followed. We walked to his truck. I glanced at the lockbox under the vinyl upholstery, knowing it held rifles, a .357 Magnum, and bear spray. Frank ignored my plea and said, "We've been here too long." He started the engine and drove out of the alley. He pulled into an empty grocery store parking lot a few blocks away. The store had closed, and only employees' cars were there. Why don't I go in there and kick? Some rear? I asked, needing Frank's logical voice again. Because you'd end up in jail, he said. It's not his fault. Ma invited him. He probably doesn't even know she's married. I need to proceed cold and cautiously if I want to get out of this marriage to my best advantage, I repeated, echoing Frank's advice. Back at Frank's apartment, he locked all the weapons and bear spray in his weapon cabinet, forbidding me from touching them while I was still in shock. We sat at the kitchen counter, and Frank poured us tequila shots, silently toasting to the messed up world. We followed with Pacifico beers. She's cheating on you with you, Frank said, pondering the situation. Maybe she's trying to rekindle the spark from when you first met. I wasn't 55 then, and our bed hasn't gone cold. Maybe she loves you and only wants more of you. Maybe Daddy is how she explains it. I shook my head, dismissing the idea. Frank continued, suggesting opening up the relationship to control the situation. I gave him a look that said, "Not happening," and asked for another pour. We overslept Friday morning, but resumed our plans. Frank drove me to a car rental agency where I got an unassuming sedan. Then I went to a bank, Maeve, and I didn't use and opened a checking account with money from our trip. I transferred half of our savings and 20% of our checking to the new account. The banker, Jim, reminded me to leave enough money in our joint account for mortgage, car loans, and credit card payments to protect my credit. He helped me set up the bank's app on my phone. Next, I went to a T-Mobile store and bought a dual SIM phone with a top-of-the-line camera. I didn't change our family account to avoid alerting Maeve. Frank convinced me to use our time until Monday to my advantage despite wanting to confront her immediately. "Sir, is everything okay?" I blinked and realized I was still at the T-Mobile table. The employee was explaining how to switch between SIM cards and I had been lost in dark thoughts. "Sorry," I said. "I banged my knee yesterday and it's causing sharp pain." "Oh, that doesn't sound good," she said skeptically. "I hope you feel better soon." She continued her explanation, and I left the store limping. Frank and I met at Starbucks and discussed the next phase of our plan over coffee. We then headed back to my neighborhood. We left Frank's noticeable truck in the same supermarket lot as last night, now filled with cars. Frank drove us in my rental to my house. This time my car was in the garage, but Ma's car and the red Hyundai Accent were gone. We reached the alley and I jumped out and entered through the back gate, which Maeve still hadn't locked. I thought about reminding her to lock it, but then I realized I was lucky she didn't. Entering through the front door might alert neighbors, so I stuck to the plan. Frank took up his position in the supermarket parking lot. We usually got home via Tompkins Parkway and 3rd Street, keeping an eye on the house. I felt a bit paranoid since Ma was supposed to be at work, but caution was key. I unlocked the back door and entered the utility room. Using a pole, I lowered the attic ladder. As I poked my head through the hatch, the walkie-talkie on my belt beeped twice. Frank's signal that he was in position. He would beep every 10 minutes as a countdown. I jammed the transmit button briefly to confirm our connection. Attic was too generous a term for the cramped storage space under the eaves. I had to crouch to move around. Luckily, the luggage I needed was just a few feet from the trapdoor. I grabbed a canvas gear bag and an old backpack-style briefcase. I avoided taking my preferred bags from downstairs to leave as little trace as possible. I closed up the attic, checking for any prints or marks. Next, I went to the alcove in the living room we used as a home office. I took my passport, social security card, will, birth certificate, and marriage license from the small safe, placing them in the briefcase. There was also $2,000 in cash. I took half. The safe also held gold coins worth about $5,000, but I only took the purchase receipt to avoid raising suspicion. Frank's double beep signaled I'd been inside for 10 minutes. I moved to the bedroom and grabbed black slacks, 2 dress shirts, 2 ties, dress socks, and black loafers, just enough for Maeve not to notice. The hard part was setting up surveillance. At Starbucks, Frank and I had figured out the new phone's time-lapse function. We didn't need sound. Visuals were enough. I hid the phone on a cabinet, peering between my hats, ensuring it captured 80% of the bed. I also adjusted the curtains for better peeking next time, despite Frank's advice against it. Another 10-minute warning from Frank came just as I finished. I moved to the living room. We had taken a trail camera from the cabin. I mounted it on a tall bookshelf to cover the sitting area. It had a motion sensor, a charged battery, and an empty SD card for the 3-day weekend. The bedroom phone would upload photos to my cloud every 6 hours. I left the house with 2 minutes to spare and received Frank's last signal. I joined him in the parking lot, keeping an eye on the corner of 3rd Street and Tompkins Parkway. Next, we went through the KFC drive-thru and sat at Frank's table with food and papers scattered around. We each had notebooks with to-do lists resembling a hostile takeover planning session. I wasn't hungry, but nibbled on chicken tenders and fries, more interested in the Jack Daniels Frank added to my cola. "Okay, you should text her," Frank said. "Gotta keep things normal." Maeve knew the cell signal in the mountains was bad and relied on it to avoid awkward calls from me. Our standard practice was to send a text just in case I found a signal while hiking, and managed to send the message. I stared at the screen. "What do I say?" "Give me that," Frank said, taking the phone. "Just say what you always do." He scrolled through our past texts. "Here we go, the usual," he read aloud as he typed. "Hey babe, we got here without any problems. The weather seems good. We'll be out on the trail early in the morning. I'll text again later. XOXO, Matt." He hit send and then started dialing another number. "Next call is to the lawyer," Frank said. Kelly DeWitt had helped him in his divorce and would be good for me too. He introduced me to her, then handed me the phone. "Hello, Matt," a pleasant voice said. "Frank didn't tell me your last name, Karras, but call me Matt," I said. "Okay, Matt, I understand this happened unexpectedly and pretty ugly," she said. "Yeah, pretty damn ugly, excuse my language," I replied. She laughed. "Don't worry, if you can't vent to your lawyer, who can you vent to?" she said. I relaxed a bit. "So, are you my lawyer? Do I need one?" I asked. "Let's start with the second question. This is about infidelity, right? Are you willing to forgive it and try counseling?" she inquired. "Hell no," I responded. "Good. Are you willing to use the court's online system to file on your own?" she asked. "That's for no-fault cases, right?" "I can't file for infidelity there," I replied. "Correct. If you want infidelity to affect alimony and such, you need an attorney," she explained. "Can you represent me? Frank says you did right by him, I said. Did he tell you the cost? She asked. He did, I confirmed. Our prices have gone up a bit, but I'll charge you the same as Frank. Sound fair? She proposed. Yes. When can we meet? I asked. I can fit you in Monday morning, she offered. I covered the phone and whispered to Frank, she wants to start right away because the case is interesting. He grinned. I told you. Miss DeWitt, that works for me. Should I bring my proof? I asked. Do you already have proof? I take it you just discovered the deception, she queried. Yes. We took screenshots of her profile and saw her with a guy last night. I also installed a camera in my bedroom to catch any other activity over the weekend, I explained. So she advertised online for partners? Interesting, she noted. And she was looking for guys who look like me, I added. Just to clarify, haven't you gained a lot of weight since you got married? She asked. No, I replied. I'm 6 feet 0 inches tall and 185, 5 pounds heavier than when we married. I lift weights and run regularly. Good to know. We'll talk more on Monday, she said. Good, that's good to hear. Okay, Matt, after we hang up, I'll open a secure data transfer site and send you the login code. Frank knows the portal address. Send me any evidence you have, and I'll review it before our meeting at 11 on Monday, she instructed. 11:000 Monday? Yes, I'll see you then, I confirmed. And Matt, she added. Yes, I responded. Avoid your wife until we meet, or don't return home. I only practice family law, not criminal law, she advised. Okay, I paused. Okay. After getting the secure code from the lawyer and sending her screenshots of Ma's profile, Frank checked my phone. My wife responded quickly, miss you, but hope you're having fun. Happy hunting. Love you, Maeve. Frank typed a message to Maeve, saying we hadn't gotten a deer yet and were about to crash for the night. He then put the phone in his safe, explaining it would act like a Faraday cage. I'll press send, but the signal will be blocked, then I'll turn off the power. When you turn it back on later, it'll look like the message was delayed by a bad signal. You read too many spy novels, I said, but I was grateful. Frank then shared his divorce experience, detailing how he had to cover the mortgage and pay spousal support for his ex-wife, even though she was still seeing another man. I hoped Ma's infidelity would spare me from such a fate. We applied Frank's knowledge. I closed investment accounts and changed the passwords for all of Ma's logins. I updated contact info on all accounts to my new phone and email. I canceled joint credit cards except for the one Ma used for daily expenses, which I lowered the limit on. As the 6-hour mark approached, it was time to check the first data dump to my cloud account. I nearly lost my KFC when I saw my wife's activities. I had programmed the phone to take 6 pictures every 30 seconds, every 15 minutes. The first set showed an empty bed, now made with different pillowcases. Out of picture sets, 6 were blank, and 5 showed her with 2 other lovers. I need to get out of here, I moaned, swallowing. Yeah, Frank agreed. Come on, I'll buy you a drink. No, I need to be alone, I said. I don't think that's a good idea, Matt, Frank said. Damn it, Frank, I need to throw up, I need to cry, I need to be alone, I insisted. I understand, but getting caught driving drunk or getting into trouble won't help, Frank advised. I assured him I'd avoid bars and home. Just get on the highway and drive, he suggested. He reluctantly agreed and sent pictures of every daddy to Kelly DT before I left. He reminded me to turn on my phone so Maeve would get my message, and he could check on me. I thanked him and headed out, promising to stay away from booze. I drove 30 minutes north and back to let night fully set in. The supermarket was still open, so I parked and walked to my house, entering the alley behind it. The back gate was locked, but I climbed over the fence. I crossed the yard quietly and peered through the gap in the curtains. Maeve was now in bed with someone. As I moved toward the back door, my phone beeped with a message and then a call from Frank. I dismissed it and continued. Suddenly, I heard, "I see you, idiot," from the darkness. It was Frank standing in the bed of his truck. Get over here or I'll start honking, he warned. I crept to the fence, making more noise than I liked. I didn't want the neighbors calling. What the hell, I hissed. She's in there with some toy soldier. I'm going to teach him some manners, Frank declared. Get out of here or I'll call the police myself, I threatened. I climbed over the fence into his truck bed. We drove quietly away and stopped at a bar on Tompkins Parkway, 2 blocks from the supermarket. We sat in a back booth, and Frank made me drink a shot of Jim Beam and take a long sip of Bud before letting me talk. I've had enough. She's turned my house into a strumpet house. I'll never sleep there again, but I'll be damned if I let this disrespect continue, I vented. Okay then, let's stop it, Frank said, catching me off guard. What? I asked. Give me your phone. He took it, went to my contacts, and called Maeve. He put it on speaker. After 5 rings, she picked up, gasping. Matt, why are you? I mean, what a nice surprise, you must really miss me, Ma said. Hi Maeve, it's Frank, Frank responded. Frank? Why are you calling? Is Matt okay? She asked, concerned. He's had a little accident. It's not too serious, but I might take him down the mountain tonight. Just wanted to let you know, Frank explained. Oh my God, what happened? Can I talk to him? May asked, panicking. Calm down, it's not that bad. He fell and hit his head on a tree branch and is sleeping with an ice pack. If he acts weird, I'll take him to the hospital, Frank assured her. Do I need to come? She asked. No, like I said. Frank ran his thumb over the microphone and dropped the phone under the table so there's no reception. Frank, I didn't hear that last part, Maeve said, confused. Frank stroked the microphone once more. Lie, 1 bar now, more later. Then he cut the call off. Okay, Frank said. We've stopped it. I laughed for the first time in 24 hours. After hanging up, I needed to know if the prank worked. Frank was sure Ma would throw out the soldier and cancel her dates if she thought I was hurt. As we walked from the bar to my house, Frank mentioned that Maeve likely made her visitors park outside the supermarket to avoid suspicion. How considerate of her, I grinned. Shh, I think that's him, Frank said. Ahead, a man in an army uniform was walking toward us. Frank positioned himself between us. Good evening, Frank addressed the soldier, who grunted in response. Frank stopped and turned, making the soldier halt and face us. He looks like you when you were younger, Frank said to me. The soldier furrowed his eyebrows, then his eyes widened as he looked between us. Young daddy, meet your real husband, Frank said. You like married women, don't you? I growled. Frank took a step in front of me. Down, boy, he said, clearly for the soldier to hear. Didn't you notice any pictures that looked like an older brother when you were at that married woman's house? Frank asked. Now I saw his anger. My buddy had been calm, but facing this situation, his own pain surfaced. She said she's divorced, the guy stammered. Not yet, but soon, I growled. Oh crap, he started to run. I knew I could catch him, but Frank stepped in front of me. No, man, no. For the second time in 2 days, I almost pushed my best friend aside, but then I saw the misery on his face. I lost Tracy to a cheater. I don't want to lose you too. I relaxed, but still wanted to go after the soldier. You've already lost the main battle, kid. If you attack him, you'll win a small one but lose the war. It'll just make you look like a fool and could land you in jail. I slumped. Maybe I'll punch him up later, I said. In 6 months after we give you an alibi. Frank grinned. We sat in my rental car in the store parking lot. Maeve had kicked the soldier out, and Frank believed we had stopped her cheating. Frank was tired of my obsession but agreed to give me an hour. We spent half at the bar, sipping beers, then returned to the car. A Nissan Sentra with out-of-state plates pulled in, and a guy got out. He read the street signs under the street light. He looked like me, a cousin perhaps. He headed up 3rd Street, and I ran up 2nd, planning to circle back to my house. Frank followed him to prevent me from confronting him. I waited at the corner of Maple and 3rd. The guy checked the house number, then walked to our front door. I hid behind a tree, watching. He rang the doorbell, and Ma partially opened the door. I couldn't see her but heard her voice, too quiet to understand. The door closed after a few seconds, and he knocked loudly. Maeve opened it on the security chain and said, I'm sorry, but it's off now. Please leave before I call the police. The door slammed, and I heard the deadbolt click. The guy stood there, realizing he had traveled far for nothing. What the hell? Hey, cow! He cut his run short when the porch light next door came on. As the door opened, he spun and walked quickly to the sidewalk. Curious retirees saved me from being seen. I stayed hidden while old Virgil Leonard looked out and saw the man walking away. Once it was clear, I hurried down 3rd Street, resisting the urge to knock on my front door. Frank waited for me around the corner of Elm, and we headed back to Tompkins. In the supermarket parking lot, we heard tires squealing as someone sped away. Anger and driving don't mix, Frank said. Very dangerous, I agreed. Saturday morning, after a restless sleep in Frank's guest room, I reviewed the camera footage from the night before. Maeve had been restless too. With nothing new, I prepared photos of Ma's encounters to send to my attorney. Should I include the video I took through the window? I asked Frank. Hell no, he replied. What you got from the other camera is enough. Let's not mention going into the house. Think that toy soldier freaked out? I asked, sending the pictures. Frank grinned. Probably. Then he frowned. I hope he stops showing off before he meets a husband with an unlocked weapon. Thanks for ruining my mood. Let's send Kelly her alarm call. That should cheer you up. Turning on my phone, I saw a dozen messages and missed calls from Maeve. I called her. Hey babe, it's Matt. Sorry Frank scared you. I'm fine now. I'll stay as planned and see you Monday night. Love you. I hit send and the phone rang. It was Kelly. Hey Kelly, didn't expect to hear from you on a Saturday morning. Hey Matt, I saw your new package on the website. I covered the microphone and asked Frank, should I tell her? He nodded. Kelly, I'm putting you on speaker so Frank can explain why Ma's night ended quietly. Good morning, Kelly, Frank said. Good morning, Frank. What have you been up to? Did I influence you badly with my barbs to Tracy? Frank explained the prank call and text messages but left out sneaking behind the house or confronting the soldier. I like that, she said when he finished. Are you sure she's canceled the other dates? Wait, she just responded to my last text, I said. Screw the dear, come home, I need you, I love you, please come home now. Told you, Frank said. Told him what? Kelly asked. That she really loves him despite all this. Kelly, have you encountered nymphomaniacs in your practice? People with serious mental disorders? She paused. I've had clients and spouses with mental health issues. It's possible, and I'm supposed to accept that. Forgive her if she claims it wasn't her fault? Kelly, you've seen the pictures. How do I stop seeing them whenever I look at her? I don't think you can, Kelly said. If she is diagnosed with a disorder, it will affect the divorce terms. But no judge will deny you a divorce after she planned all this. This conversation forced me to make a decision. Kelly, how quickly can you file the papers? I can't live with her anymore. I understand, she said. I'll have some options ready for us to discuss on Monday. We'll likely need to meet with her and her lawyer before deciding. Okay, but what do I tell her Monday night when I don't come home? You won't tell her anything. I'll handle that. So, what should I do now? I asked. I've reviewed your actions and you seem to have it covered. Anything more might backfire, so sit tight, be patient, and don't do anything rash. Frank grinned and said, I'm doing my best to keep him from that, but he keeps trying. By the way, Matt, didn't you say you were still good for Kay? Frank and I froze, wondering if Kelly was referring to my stamina. Yeah, I think I said something like that, I replied cautiously. Good, run along then. Bye, boys. She hung up. Ma called again, and I turned off my phone. Following Kelly's advice, I went to buy new running gear, as I hadn't brought any on the hunt. Frank joined me for a run, but we stopped at 3 miles beyond his comfort zone. I still felt restless, so Frank suggested another way to vent. We put the rifles back in his truck and headed to a shooting range an hour away to practice. I shot much more than Frank, so he finished cleaning his rifle first and talked to the range master. They glanced at me a few times. What did he say? I asked Frank on the way back. He asked if I could keep you from shooting anything but paper targets. I said I could. Frank moved my rifle to his weapons safe as soon as we returned to his apartment. The weekend was torturous, with Frank keeping me occupied. We watched Marvel movies, and he limited my whiskey, making sure I had non-alcoholic drinks in between. He managed my correspondence with Maeve, telling her I was doing well and still hunting. On Sunday, he texted her that I planned to spend the day in a tree stand. She's starting to call you an idiot for not coming home. Frank laughed. Wait until she gets served with divorce papers, I replied. A part of me enjoyed the payback, but mostly, I was miserable. I loved Ma and thought she loved me too. Maybe she had a mental breakdown. I wondered if I'd need therapy too. After a 4th sleepless night, I woke up Monday exhausted but resolute about the divorce. Maeve had planned too much and enjoyed it too much. We texted her that we were leaving again that morning and wouldn't be back until late. I apologized for scaring her on Friday and assured her I was fine. We did this from the supermarket parking lot near our house. Her response was quick. You let me suffer all weekend and still can't give up that deer to come back early. Maybe you should just go to Frank's place because I don't want to see you right away. I had to smile at the irony of her suggesting what I had been planning all along. 15 minutes later, I saw her car heading down 3rd Street and turning right onto Tompkins, her usual route to work. I parked in the alley behind our house, not trying to be completely undercover, but avoiding the front to prevent any neighborly curiosity. Once the coast was clear, I climbed the fence and entered through the back door. I retrieved my camera from the living room and my new cell phone from the bedroom. Then I grabbed a suitcase from the 2nd bedroom, which served as a pantry and closet but was supposed to be a nursery someday. That plan was now shattered, and my heart ached even more. I filled the suitcase with more clothes, gold coins from the safe, and my laptop. I figured she would hear the bad news from Kelly before realizing I had been in the house. Back at Frank's, I pulled the SD card from the camera and plugged it into the computer. Exhausted, I brushed my teeth and collapsed, fully dressed, onto the bed until Frank called to tell me the videotaping was over in the living room. Frank was making breakfast sandwiches in the microwave, and coffee was brewing. Ah, the bachelor life. Check out the rest of the camera footage, he said. It'll make you feel better. My laptop was on the coffee table with a shot of whiskey next to it. On a Monday morning, and I was already embracing the life of a divorced man. Why not? I downed the shot and braced myself to watch the footage. Frank was right. The video from Friday night to Monday morning was more entertaining and informative than expected. After the soldier left, we saw snippets of Maeve pacing the house, phone in hand, talking or texting, trying to check on me. This continued all night Saturday and Sunday. She looked increasingly irritated as I brushed off her concerns in favor of hunting. I noticed how Maeve cleaned up, putting back items in the living room that had been missing, mostly pictures of me. Frank sat next to me, eating sausage biscuits and drinking black coffee. "Damn," I said. "She really erased me, didn't she?" That guard wasn't lying when he said Ma filed for divorce. "Wait, go back," Frank said. "Go back to the end of Friday. What did you see?" I asked, rewinding to an earlier clip. "Look at her hands," he said. Ma was pacing the living room, texting with both hands. What then? I realized, oh no, rings. I skipped ahead to around 10:30 Saturday morning. Here they are. She played the role of divorcee to the last. Kelly DT, my attorney, greeted me when I arrived at her office. She was tall in a well-tailored suit with striking features. I focused on her dark amber eyes as she assessed me. 6 feet, 180, long-distance runner with some muscle. I guess I can believe the rest of your self-description, she said. Thankfully, she phrased it as a statement. Have a seat, Matt. I'm sure it's been a rough weekend. How are you? Kelly asked. It's been hard. Anything new from Maeve? I had sent her some of Ma's messages, including the one asking me not to come home. This just came in while I was parking. I handed her my phone. Baby, please ignore my last message. Yes, I'm mad, but I need you home. I'm dying here without you, please, Maddie, Kelly read aloud. Okay, Kelly said. It doesn't seem like your wife did this to get rid of you. I have a feeling once she knows you found out, she won't try it again. I can't pretend this didn't happen, I said. No, of course not. But if she explains and promises it won't happen again, could you forgive her? Kelly asked. Kelly raised her hand to stop my angry response. I have to ask about reconciliation, Matt. The judge will insist, and I get the feeling you still love her, she continued. I do, but I don't see how I can. You saw pictures and clips, but you didn't sit through it all, I said. Kelly didn't need to ask what I meant. She simply said, I understand, but as a family lawyer, I have to see if the family can be saved. Maeve will likely fight to keep you two together, but no, she can't force you into marriage counseling. I'm sure not in this case. Okay, tell me your plan, and let's work out the property and financial details. If you want to file quickly, I said. Since this is for infidelity, do I still have to give her half of everything and pay alimony, since my income is double hers? I asked. Kelly spent the morning answering these questions and more. By p.m., with deli sandwiches delivered, she had sketched out a plan to minimize the damage to my finances and position. It was time to pull the trigger, and I nodded to Kelly. She put my phone on speaker and called Maeve. The call was answered before the first ring ended. Maddie, where are you? Are you coming home? Are you okay? What the hell are you playing at, idiot? Oh God, baby, I need you. Where are you? Ma said frantically. Mrs. Karras, Kelly almost yelled to stop Ma's rant. What? Who is that? Oh my God, she screamed. Where's Matt? What happened to Matt? Mrs. Karras, my lawyer said louder. Using my phone to call Maeve wasn't the best plan, but we feared she'd ignore any other call. Mr. Karras, Matthias, is fine. He wasn't hurt at all. He's fine, Kelly assured her. But Frank said, Who are you and why are you calling on Matt's phone? Ma asked, confused. Mr. Karras gave me his phone to ensure you'd answer. I assure you, he's fine. Mr. Spinner's reports were a hoax. I apologize for the fear they caused, Kelly explained. Kelly stuck her tongue out at me. A prank? What's going on? Who are you and why are you calling my cell phone, Matt? Maeve demanded. Mrs. Karras, I'm using Mr. Karras's phone with his permission, and this call is being recorded. Do you mind? Kelly said as Ma's voice trailed off, still angry and puzzled. Why is it being recorded? Who are you? Ma asked. My name is Kelly DeWitt, an attorney with Green Family Law in Springville. Your husband, Matthias Karras, has hired me to represent him in the dissolution of your marriage, Kelly stated. The dissolution? Ma repeated, stunned. Yes, Mr. Karras wants the dissolution to be quick and private, Kelly confirmed. A sordid affair? I imagined Maeve stunned, able only to repeat Kelly's words. Yes, Mrs. Karras, normally we'd serve you with divorce papers, but Mr. Karras hopes to reach an agreement outside of court. Please contact your attorney as soon as possible, Kelly instructed. Attorney, Ma echoed. Yes. Do you have a pen and paper? I'll give you my contact information, Kelly offered. No, I don't, Ma replied. I'll send you a message with my contact information. After that, the phone will stop working and you won't be able to contact Mr. Karras through it, Kelly explained. But I need to talk to Matt. This is all wrong. We love each other. Is he there? I need to talk to him, Ma pleaded. I'm sorry, Mrs. Karras, but Mr. Karras isn't ready to talk. Have your lawyer contact me. Goodbye, Kelly said firmly. Kelly hung up as Maeve began to speak. That went well, Kelly said, sending a text with her office information to Ma's phone before disconnecting it. Her words were sarcastic but sounded sad. Are you okay? I asked, feeling the odd role reversal. I like protecting spouses from misuse, but cases like this make me sad and tired. There's something strange going on here, Matt. I think you're doing the right thing, but I don't sense vindictiveness from your wife. For whatever reason, maybe an uncontrollable dependence, she's blown up her life, and neither of you will be happy. Screw me, I'm not even. Have I already seen the last happy day of my life? Kelly shook her head vigorously. No, it sucks now, but it's not the end. We'll connect you with a therapist. If you take counseling seriously, you'll recover faster. Frank waited too long for counseling, and it cost him unnecessary pain. Don't make the same mistake. Yeah, it cost me, Frank confirmed a few hours later as we ate chicken wings, shrimp, and Bloody Marys at a downtown sports bar. I thought therapy was just psychological nonsense, but I ended up wallowing in my own mess like a clogged toilet. You talked to me for a while, and you could have talked more, I said, trying to ignore his metaphor. I know you had my back, but seeing you and Maeve so happy hurt more than it helped, at least until I got outside counseling. But why? I asked. Because you and Maeve seemed perfect, and it made me grieve for what I'd lost. Realizing I'd been living a lie for so long hurt even more. I sipped my drink, unsure of what to say. After seeing Kelly's therapist, I could finally see you two as a sign of hope instead of a reminder of my past, and now it's all turned out to be another lie, I said. Screw me, he muttered. Screw me, I repeated, raising my glass for a toast. We clinked quietly and drank deeply. Hey, Matt, have a seat, Kelly DeWitt said, this time in a small conference room with papers spread out on a table. It was Tuesday afternoon, and I had taken the day off. After updating my work information on Monday, I spent most of the day at Frank's, searching for a new apartment since I couldn't live in my ruined house. I ran 5 miles in the morning and another 3 before meeting Kelly, hoping the endorphins would help me stay calm. Kelly had talked to Maeve that morning, and she said I needed to hear what Ma had to say in person. When the receptionist led me to the conference room, I half expected to see Maeve and her lawyer waiting. Kelly laughed lightly, waving me into the empty room. No, just us. We needed space to work. As I sat down, she added, Ma wanted to be here to explain, but if this were a TV show, it would be a classic showdown. Glad it's not television, I said. Kelly gave me a wicked grin as I thought about our meeting the day before. I realized I was glad she wasn't like Ma at all. I think you'd be surprised, Kelly said, but it would be better if you heard it from Maeve. Stop escalating the situation, I said. Hear what? That she did it all for you? Kelly replied. I'm sure she got more than she expected, I said, shocked. What the hell? I barely stopped the profanity. The smirk disappeared from Kelly's face, and she placed her hand on mine as they clenched into fists on the table. She claimed I was some kind of willing betrayed man, I added. My voice rose, and I started to stand, but Kelly grabbed my wrist. No, oh God, Matt, no. I'm sorry. I didn't think you'd take it that way. I'm really sorry, Kelly said, trying to calm me. I relaxed slightly and stared at her. Ma didn't say that. She's very upset. That you found out and left her. I hadn't thought of it that way, but yes, I admitted. Then what did you mean by she did it all for me, I asked. The baby, Kelly said quietly. It hit me. We've been trying to have a baby for 11 months. She found someone like me to get her pregnant since I hadn't succeeded yet. She wanted a baby desperately. And I hadn't realized she was willing to go to such extreme measures. She was doing this to get pregnant? I asked, seeking confirmation. Yes, Kelly replied, pushing some pages toward me. It was a lab report from 3 months ago, ordered by my gynecologist. It took me a moment to realize that Dr. Wellborn had provided 2 samples from patient 25,473, both with low counts. Am I patient 25,473? I asked. Kelly nodded. But how did she get the samples? I asked, seeing Kelly's embarrassment for the first time. She secretly took samples for analysis when you couldn't get her pregnant after 6 months, Kelly explained. Instead of talking to me, she found guys who looked like me and accepted their donations the old-fashioned way, Kelly continued. She said your insurance didn't cover a RT, which is expensive, and you'd already used your savings to buy the house. I leaned forward, my forehead on the desk. That means I won't have to pay child support if her plan works, right? Kelly looked even sadder. You'll still need to get tested since you're low, but not zero. Why not? What's wrong? I asked. Ma realized she was exposed and you're threatening divorce, so she went to her OBGYN for the morning after pill. Kelly said, but today isn't the morning after. She was with her first guy Thursday night, I said, confused. Dr. Wellborn confirmed it. Ma asked her to call me, Kelly explained. Ma had gone to extreme lengths to conceive, but now, knowing I wouldn't raise someone else's child, she was erasing the mistake. It was also sad. Then I realized another detail. She did this just before my hunting trip. She was preparing to get pregnant and would have been with me on Monday to reinforce the idea. God knows what diseases she picked up, I said. Kelly held my hand reassuringly. STDs are a concern, but Ma was thinking about that too when she made the appointment. Matt, after our meeting yesterday, I reviewed the security footage and noticed something strange. At the beginning of her visits, she'd often look at the smartphones of her visitors. She did this a month ago too, Kelly said. Oh crap, I muttered. What? Kelly asked. She did it a month ago too. I still have to take the test, I said. Uh-huh, she admitted. It was the first and only time when that didn't work. She tried again during your hunting trip. She planned to return to Fidelity afterward, Kelly explained. I thought we agreed we wanted at least 2 or 3 children, I said, shaking off the heartbreaking thoughts. Did you say something about the camera footage and STDs? Yes. Did you notice how she often checked her visitors' smartphones shortly after they arrived? Kelly asked. Yes, I figured she was checking their invites, I replied. She was checking their current STI and HIV test results, Kelly clarified. Disbelief showed on my face. They get tested regularly. Yeah, they do, Kelly continued. So what? I asked Frank later over pizza and beer. Do you get tested regularly and carry the results? Actually, yes, I do. I always use protection, and I carry the labs with me. If I start dating again, I'll probably have to do that nonsense too, Frank said. When you start dating again, he emphasized. But yeah, I'd recommend it, man. I got to say, he continued. I'm surprised Ma's lawyer let her spill so many details early in the negotiations. She doesn't have a lawyer yet. Kelly found her outside her office this morning and insisted on talking. Kelly advised her to get a lawyer, but Maeve was convinced that once I knew the truth, I'd call off the divorce. And how did that work out? He asked. Riley, Kelly said. Maeve believed her plan made so much sense that I would come home tonight. Frank handed me another beer as we sat in his apartment. I planned to stay there until deciding if I could live in the same town as Maeve, let alone the same house. A week and a half later, I was back in the conference room at Green Family Law. Kelly and I sat on one side, Maeve and her attorney on the other. Mr. Karras, Mr. Witt, said the balding lawyer, we have 2 problems. First, Mrs. Karras wants to stay married. Second, if reconciliation is impossible, the proposed agreement is insufficient. It suggests a 50/50th division of property but doesn't include all marital assets, and the proposed spousal support is too low and short-lived. Kelly tapped my foot under the table, signaling, I told you so. I acknowledged it faintly. Mr. Philpott, Kelly interjected, Mr. Karras has agreed to pay 60% of your fees as part of the assets. This shows remarkable fairness for a man who has been wronged. The judge will take note of this if we can't resolve these issues here. I wanted the case over with and for Maeve to be treated fairly, not to get half of everything, but to avoid living in a disadvantaged area or moving in with her parents. She refused to get a lawyer, thinking we shouldn't divorce. With her salary, she could only afford a subpar lawyer, so I asked Kelly to find someone decent for her. And Kelly continued, What about my client's quality of life? You've seen the evidence, Mr. Philpott. Imagine what he goes through every night with those images in his head. It was dramatic, but Kelly wasn't exaggerating. I struggled with therapy, although Kelly and Frank assured me it would help. Ironically, the psychiatrist consultation was covered by my health plan, unlike Art, which could have prevented all this. I'm so sorry, Maddie, so sorry, Maeve sobbed. Philpott squeezed her hand again. Miss DeWitt, Philpott said, while I sympathize with Mr. Karras, our state's laws don't consider these matters in dividing marital property or awarding spousal support. Mr. Philpott, Kelly snapped, if your client doesn't agree to the negotiated offer, we won't file it. If we go to court, she placed her hand on a thicker pile of papers, this petition will be filed on the grounds of your client's infidelity. The settlement terms here are much less generous. I saw his hand tremble as he wanted to open the package but held back. Okay, I'd gotten Maeve fair representation while making this case public would embarrass Mr. Karras. It would be even worse for Mrs. Karras, especially since we will subpoena the names of all participants in her affairs and conduct a paternity test on the child she tried to conceive with them. Maeve gasped, then made a sound of deep sadness. Okay, stop it, shouted an indignant Philpott. There's no need to be so rude, Mr. Witt. Mrs. Karras took measures to avoid conception despite wanting a child with Mr. Karras, a desire he shared. My baby, our baby, I whispered. Kelly placed her hand on mine and pressed her foot against mine. But it would be ours, Ma exclaimed. It would be ours, yours and mine. The lawyers agreed to a short break. Kelly took me to her office while Philpott led Maeve outside. As we reconvened, Philpott continued, Mrs. Karras took drastic measures forced by her husband's stubbornness to prevent conception, even though it could have been Mr. Karras's child. Kelly stood firmly, sensing my anger. Her next words were softer, directed at Ma. We understand Mrs. Karras made a difficult decision and did the right thing under the circumstances. Mr. Karras and I recognize the pain she must be feeling. Kelly then turned back to Philpott. Unfortunately, it hasn't been determined if your client's intervention was successful. She may still be pregnant. We need to address this threat at the root. I glanced at Maeve, who looked pale, fearing she might faint. Kelly continued. The agreement states any such child would not belong to my client. Mr. Karras will take a paternity test to confirm this. If we go to court, we will demand the same from any potential fathers. Kelly wanted to add, if she decides to carry the baby, but I vetoed that. There was enough tension already. Ma pressed her lawyer's hand. They had discussed their next steps. All that aside, Philpott said, we'd like to return to Mrs. Karras's first position, not to file for divorce. Instead, she and her husband should go to counseling and find a solution to start a family. Why couldn't she have done this from the beginning? I almost howled. Why not just tell me instead of cheating? Mr. Karras, Matt, voices overlapped before I slammed my fist on the table. I stared at the surface and said through clenched teeth, I'm already in counseling. My therapist says the why question is like a funnel. I can't heal until it fills up. He suggested I ask Maeve to join a session, but now I need to know why you brought strangers into our bed, instead of telling me about the problem. My client didn't, Philpott began, but Ma interrupted. I didn't want to hurt you by telling you that you couldn't give me a baby. You're so into your physicality, and I didn't want you to think you weren't enough, insisted Maeve. Oh my God, am I really such an idiot? I asked, wondering if I'd missed a character flaw. No, she repeated. I said it wrong. She took a breath. If we could afford IVF, I'd have told you, but we couldn't. We wanted to start a family now, so it was about the donor, not breaking out of the monotony of marriage. Exactly, Ma exclaimed. Why would I ever want to run away, so you didn't enjoy it? She flinched but continued. Don't you see? Yes, I called them folders on my page, but they were really all you. Any memories were connected to you, like in those multiverse comic book movies you love. I could add the memories of doing it with you, younger or older, to the wonderful memories I have of doing it with you now. And when you thought back to those encounters, or feeding the child one of those alternate selves had put inside you, you always thought of your real self, right? She grimaced at my words but continued. Yes, always about you. I turned to look at Attorney DeWitt, who raised her eyebrows in question. I nodded silently. She reached for the other folder, circled in red, the nuclear option. As I spoke, Kelly slowly pulled out a series of photos and placed them in front of Maeve and her lawyer. The 8x10 color photos were from the front and back cameras in the house, as well as a video I had taken Friday night while spying. Ma's face turned from gray to green, and she barely made it to the trash can before throwing up. Our house on 3rd Street sold quickly despite owning it for less than 2 years. It had appreciated enough to pay off the mortgage and cover moving expenses. I moved from Frank's apartment to a work-friendly condo, and May moved back to her hometown, though she managed to get a small apartment instead of moving into her childhood bedroom. She wasn't pregnant, and she found a decent job that allowed her a reasonable lifestyle. While the child support I paid for 5 months wasn't a huge strain, I was glad she wouldn't be destitute when it stopped. After the 6th month, she brought this misfortune on both of us, and her betrayal still haunted me. She was the love of my life, and I knew her remorse and regrets were genuine. Her last letter said she still hoped for reconciliation, but that seemed unlikely. Therapy helped me dump anger and despair, and I no longer saw myself as a huge loser facing decades of dull monotony. As for Tracy, she ended up as a barista at a Starbucks, blaming Frank for her troubles, though there was no evidence to support it. The police cleared him with witnesses and surveillance footage proving he was at a Foo Fighters concert that night. Looking ahead, once I pay the last amount of spousal support, I'll have fulfilled all my obligations. From the divorce, and Kelly DeWitt will no longer be my attorney. When she found out I attended an art exhibit and enjoyed it, she said she wished our first date had been at the gallery too.
Welcome back to the Cheating Tales Lab. First of all, a huge thank you for helping us reach 5,000 subscribers. Thank you all for your amazing support. To celebrate, we're launching our second channel, Infidelity Tales Lab, where you'll get one-day early access to all our stories plus exclusive, original cheating wife stories you won't find anywhere else. You can subscribe now by clicking the link in the description or the pinned comment, or simply search for Infidelity Tales Lab on YouTube. Don't miss out. Subscribe and listen to exclusive stories. You won't regret subscribing. Now let's begin the story. The setting sun painted golden streaks across the polished marble floors of the Sullivan Mansion's modernist living room. Lawrence Sullivan stood motionless, his tall frame reflected in the same mirror where his wife Patricia was adjusting her dress. The red fabric clung to her curves like a second skin, the neckline plunging well below what any respectable corporate wife would wear to a merger announcement. Lawrence observed her with the same analytical precision that had made him one of Silicon Valley's most formidable CEOs. At 45, he still cut an imposing figure in his tailored charcoal suit. Years of martial arts training and disciplined workout routines had kept him fit, while building Sullivan Technologies into a cybersecurity empire had honed his mind into a weapon sharper than any blade. "You know how important tonight is," he said, his deep voice carrying the quiet authority that had become his trademark. "The merger announcement requires a certain level of professionalism. That dress sends the wrong message." Patricia's fingers lingered on the fabric, smoothing it over her hips with deliberate slowness. "It's always about your image, isn't it, Lawrence?" She reached for her lipstick, applying another layer of crimson. "God forbid I want to feel beautiful for once. Not everything revolves around Sullivan Technologies." The words hung in the air like poison gas, triggering something in Lawrence's mind. As CEO of the world's leading cybersecurity firm, he'd built his career on detecting patterns. The smallest anomaly could indicate a system breach. Lately, the anomalies in his personal life had been accumulating, unexplained absences that stretched beyond their stated duration, phone calls that ended abruptly when he entered a room, personal training sessions that always seemed to run late, credit card charges from hotels in the city where they lived, new jewelry she claimed to have had for years. Instead of responding to her barb, Lawrence checked his phone. A message from Chris Berger, his head of security, confirmed what he needed to know. His private team was in position. He'd hired Chris 8 years ago, recognizing in the former Special Forces operator the same ruthless efficiency he valued in himself. Where Lawrence was subtle steel, Chris was raw iron. Effective, unyielding, and absolutely loyal. "I need to handle some things at the office before the gala," Lawrence said, adjusting his platinum cufflinks, a 5th anniversary gift from Patricia that now felt like a marker of mockery. "I'll meet you there." Patricia barely acknowledged him, too busy with her preparation. Her indifference was new, or perhaps he was only now allowing himself to see it. As he left the room, he activated a secure line to Chris. "Begin Protocol 7, he ordered. "Full surveillance, no limitations. I want eyes and ears on everything." "Sir," Chris's voice held a note of concern. "That level of monitoring, it's unprecedented. The resources require." "Do it. You have complete authorization." "And Chris? This stays between us." Lawrence descended the curved staircase of his home, past the family portraits that now seemed like elaborate props in a staged play. He'd built this life on a foundation of integrity and family values. Sullivan Technologies wasn't just another tech company. It was a legacy he'd intended to pass down to his children. Now, watching his wife prepare for what she thought was a simple corporate gala, he felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. His Tesla waited in the circular driveway, its black surface reflecting the sunset like obsidian. As he slid behind the wheel, another message from Chris lit up his secure phone. "Initial surveillance active. You need to see this." The Sullivan Technologies corporate headquarters dominated the San Francisco skyline, its glass and steel structure a testament to Lawrence's vision. But tonight, he bypassed the executive floor for a secure room 3 levels below ground. Here, surrounded by monitors displaying multiple camera feeds, Lawrence watched his wife's calculated performance at the gala. Patricia had made her entrance 20 minutes ago, the red dress drawing exactly the kind of attention she'd intended. She'd immediately gravitated toward Herman Black, Lawrence's supposed best friend and COO. Through high-resolution cameras and directional microphones, Lawrence observed their interaction with growing coldness. "Come here often, stranger?" Patricia's voice came through crisp and clear as she sidled up to Herman at the bar. Her hand brushed his arm in a gesture too familiar for comfort. Herman's fingers traced her waist, hidden from the crowd by the bar's position. "You're playing a dangerous game tonight, Pat. That dress." "Lawrence still suspects nothing," she whispered, leaning close enough that her lips nearly brushed Herman's ear. "The shell companies are in place. Once the merger goes through next week, everything changes. The accounts are ready?" Herman's voice held equal measures of lust and greed. "Everything's prepared. Sandy confirmed the last transfers yesterday. It's perfect." Lawrence is so busy protecting the company from external threats, he never thought to look inside his own home. Lawrence's fingers tightened on his desk as Chris entered with a tablet. The former operator's face was grim. "Sir, our team has uncovered something bigger than an affair. You need to see this." The evidence unfolded across multiple screens, each revelation more damaging than the last. The merger with Jared Norton's tech firm wasn't an expansion opportunity. It was an elaborate trap designed to hollow out Sullivan Technologies from the inside. Patricia wasn't just sleeping with Herman. She was the central figure in a conspiracy that included Norton, Herman, and even Lawrence's own brother, Guillermo. "There's more," Chris said, pulling up another set of files. "Your daughter's recent behavioral issues? The declining grades, the rebellion, the sudden hostility toward you? We've found evidence that Mrs. Sullivan has been deliberately sabotaging your relationship with both children." Surveillance footage played across the screens. Patricia in careful conversation with Mandy's teachers, planting seeds of doubt about Lawrence's commitment to his family. Text messages showed her manipulating situations, staging incidents designed to drive wedges between father and children. She'd even gone as far as intercepting and altering messages between Lawrence and his son Bill at college. "Show me everything," Lawrence commanded, his voice carrying the kind of deadly calm that preceded hurricanes. "Every detail, every player, every angle." For the next hour, they pieced together a conspiracy that stretched back years. Patricia hadn't just betrayed their marriage. She'd orchestrated a complete infiltration of his life. The cameras continued to show the gala, where she laughed and danced, celebrating what she thought was her imminent victory. The night stretched into early morning as Lawrence dove deeper into encrypted servers and hidden accounts. Each discovery was another betrayal crystallized in data, another crack in the foundation of trust he'd built his life upon. His brother Guillermo had been running ghost projects through the R&D department, siphoning millions through fake research initiatives. The money trail led to offshore accounts, carefully hidden but not invisible to someone with Lawrence's resources. Herman's betrayal went beyond the affair. He'd been selling company secrets to competitors, using the profits to fund a lavish lifestyle that included regular trips with Patricia to private villas in the Mediterranean. Their affair hadn't been a recent development. Bank records showed shared accounts dating back 3 years. Patricia's role was perhaps the most insidious. She'd methodically gathered compromising information on board members, building a blackmail portfolio that would have given her control of the company after Lawrence's planned ouster. She'd used her position as his wife to access information, to build relationships, to plant seeds of doubt about his leadership. But Sandy, his sister-in-law, had been the biggest surprise. She'd constructed an entire shadow company built on stolen Sullivan Technologies patents, preparing to launch competing products the moment Lawrence was removed from power. "Sir," Chris said, returning with another set of files. "We've confirmed the timing. The dress tonight, it wasn't just inappropriate. They're celebrating. The merger announcement was supposed to be the beginning of your end. They think they've won." Lawrence stood, walking to the window that overlooked the sleeping city. In the reflection, he could see the monitors behind him, Patricia and Herman sharing another intimate moment, his brother glad-handing investors, Sandy watching it all with satisfied eyes. "Activate Protocol Zero," he said, his voice carrying absolute finality. Chris didn't bother hiding his concern. "Sir, Protocol Zero. The collateral damage will be extensive. Personal reputations, careers, families. They chose their fate when they targeted my children." Lawrence turned, his face illuminated by the city lights and the glow of monitors. "They didn't just try to steal my company. They tried to steal my legacy. Execute Protocol Zero. Now." Through the cameras, he could still see Patricia laughing with Herman, their hands touching under tables, their confidence complete. They had no idea that Lawrence Sullivan didn't just plan for cyber attacks. He planned for everything. The first phase of Protocol Zero began at midnight. A cascade of encrypted locks on company data, phantom account transfers, and the quiet activation of hidden contract clauses that would trap millions in legal limbo. By the time Patricia danced with Herman to what they thought was their victory song, Lawrence had already seized control of every shell company they'd created. His most trusted assistant, Brooke, worked silently in an adjacent office, gathering evidence and securing his children's futures. Mandy, away at a friend's house, had already been contacted and protected. Bill's college accounts were transferred to secure trusts beyond Patricia's reach. Lawrence watched the final pieces fall into place, remembering Patricia's words from earlier. Maybe I want to feel beautiful for once. She'd never looked uglier to him than she did now, draped over Herman, plotting his destruction. The red dress that had been meant to mark her triumph would instead become the symbol of her downfall. Dawn approached as Lawrence made his final preparations. While Patricia celebrated her imagined victory, divorce papers were being delivered to their home, along with evidence of her crimes carefully distributed to select board members. Lawrence Sullivan, the man she thought she'd deceived, would be gone. But Lawrence Sullivan, the man who'd built an empire on seeing the patterns others missed, would be very much alive and very, very angry. The night of the gala wouldn't be remembered as the beginning of Lawrence Sullivan's downfall. Instead, it would mark the start of the most meticulously planned revenge in Silicon Valley history. The gala's music pulsed through the grand ballroom of the St. Regis as Lawrence's plan unfolded with mechanical precision. In the building's secure server room, his team of cybersecurity experts executed complex protocols that would seal the conspirators' fate. Lines of code scrolled across screens as company data underwent military-grade encryption, while carefully crafted algorithms began transferring millions into phantom accounts. Through the surveillance feeds, Lawrence watched Patricia twirl in Herman's arms, her red dress a splash of blood against the white marble floor. Neither of them noticed when their phones briefly lost signal, the moment when their access to the shell company's accounts was permanently severed. "Sir, Phase 1 is complete," reported his lead IT specialist. "All offshore accounts have been redirected. The phantom protocols are active." Lawrence nodded, his face illuminated by the blue glow of monitors. "Trigger the contract clauses." Brooke, his executive assistant of 8 years, worked methodically at her station. She'd been gathering evidence for months, having noticed discrepancies in board meeting minutes and irregular patterns in company communications. Now, she was ensuring every piece of documentation was properly secured and backed up on servers that only Lawrence could access. "Mr. Sullivan," Brooke said, looking up from her screen, "Mandy is secure. The security team confirmed she's chosen to leave with you. She's quite angry about what her mother did." A brief flash of emotion crossed Lawrence's face, the only one he'd shown all night. His daughter had inherited his analytical mind. Once presented with evidence of Patricia's manipulation, the altered text messages, the staged conflicts, the deliberate sabotage of father-daughter events, she'd made her choice with cold clarity. And Bill? The trust is established and funded. His college accounts are secured. He's protected, sir, though he doesn't know everything yet. We thought it best to wait until after his finals. Lawrence turned to Chris, who stood by the door. "Begin Phase 2. While Patricia danced and laughed, believing she was celebrating her impending triumph, Lawrence's team executed a series of precisely timed operations. All company data was locked behind new encryption protocols. Millions in assets were legally transferred through predetermined channels. Hidden contract clauses were activated, giving Lawrence control of the shell companies. Emergency board protocols were initiated, temporarily concentrating power in the CEO position. Surveillance data was secured and backed up to multiple secure locations. By midnight, as Patricia sipped champagne with her co-conspirators, Lawrence had effectively seized control of every asset they thought they'd stolen. The irony of their celebration wasn't lost on him. They were toasting their own destruction. "The divorce papers are being delivered now," Brooke confirmed. Along with selected evidence packages to specific board members, Lawrence stood, straightening his tie. "Distribute the remaining files as planned. It's time." Before dawn broke over San Francisco, Lawrence Sullivan, the man they thought they'd outsmarted, vanished completely. His disappearance was as meticulous as everything else he did. No trace, no trail, no loose ends. Patricia's homecoming would be her first taste of the new reality. She'd find all accounts emptied or frozen, divorce papers detailing her infidelity and conspiracy, evidence of her crimes in the hands of key board members, her access to company resources completely revoked, her carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. The first cracks appeared at dawn. Herman Black stood in his private office, staring at his computer screen in disbelief. Every offshore account empty. Years of carefully hidden funds, gone. His phone buzzed constantly with alerts. Access denied, transfer failed, account suspended. What the hell is happening? He barked into his phone. All pretense of smooth sophistication gone. Fix this. But there was nothing to fix. The money hadn't been stolen. It had been legally reclaimed through a web of contracts and clauses so complex that his lawyers were already getting headaches. Across town, Guillermo Sullivan watched federal auditors march into his department. They carried boxes of documents, detailed records of every ghost project, every fraudulent transaction, every fake research initiative he'd used to embezzle millions. His attempt to call his sister-in-law Sandy went straight to voicemail. Sandy had problems of her own. Her parallel company, built on stolen Sullivan Technologies patents, faced not just litigation but complete annihilation. Emergency injunctions had frozen her assets. Cease and desist orders arrived by the dozen. Her technical team reported that critical data was simply gone. But it was Jared Norton who broke first. The veteran tech executive recognized a lost cause when he saw one. He reached out to federal investigators with an offer. Evidence of Patricia's involvement in industrial espionage in exchange for immunity. His betrayal was quick, complete, and self-serving, exactly what Lawrence had predicted. Patricia's fall was particularly spectacular. Her society friends, who'd once competed for her attention, now wouldn't return her calls. Claudia Martinez, Lawrence's corporate counsel and a pillar of San Francisco society, led the social exodus. The same people who'd admired Patricia's red dress at the gala now whispered about her disgrace at charity functions. "I don't know what you're talking about," Herman declared publicly when asked about their relationship. Mrs. Sullivan was simply another board member's wife. "These accusations are ridiculous." He'd thrown her under the bus so fast it left skid marks. Watching him deny their relationship on live television, Patricia finally understood. She'd been played for a fool, not by Lawrence, but by her own co-conspirators. Time became Lawrence's greatest weapon. While his enemies expected immediate destruction, he delivered something far more devastating. Slow, systematic dismantling of their lives. Like a master chess player, he'd set up moves that would play out over years. Guillermo's downfall came first. Over 18 months, Lawrence's algorithms orchestrated what appeared to be a series of unfortunate market crashes. Each one targeted his brother's remaining investments with surgical precision. By the end of year 2, Guillermo Sullivan, once a millionaire executive, was selling his house to cover basic expenses. "It's just bad luck," Guillermo told his wife, staring at another margin call notice. "The market's volatile." But it wasn't luck. It was Lawrence, operating through layers of shells and proxies, using his brother's own greed against him. Every time Guillermo thought he'd found a safe investment, invisible hands would shift the market just enough to destroy him. Sandy's destruction took longer, but proved more complete. Her company weathered the first wave of patent lawsuits, but then strange things began happening. Critical servers failed at crucial moments. Potential clients received anonymous tips about security vulnerabilities. Mysterious cyber attacks exposed just enough of her stolen technology to scare away investors. "There's nothing linking these incidents," her security team reported. "It's like we're cursed." 3 years in, Sandy's company collapsed under the weight of litigation and technical failures. The industry blacklist followed naturally. No one would hire an executive with her record of incompetence. Herman's reputation died by 1,000 cuts. Evidence of his affairs, not just with Patricia, but with numerous others, leaked to the press in a steady drip. Each revelation was more damaging than the last. His attempts to deny them only made him look worse, especially when time-stamped videos proved his lies. "I assure you, these allegations are completely false," he'd say, only to have photos appear the next day showing exactly what he denied. Patricia's attempts to access Lawrence's fortune met with constant failure. Every legal challenge was met with overwhelming evidence of her crimes. Her lawyers kept quitting as new conflicts of interest mysteriously emerged. Her attempts to sell stories to the press backfired when journalists received proof of her lies. But while his enemies floundered, Lawrence rebuilt. Operating under various aliases and through multiple corporations, he constructed a new empire. His children thrived under his guidance. Mandy discovered her talent for cybersecurity, eventually becoming one of the field's rising stars. Bill excelled in corporate law, his understanding of business enhanced by watching his father's strategic brilliance. Both children understood the truth. Their father hadn't run away. He'd removed them from a toxic environment. Lawrence maintained perfect operational security through it all. Not once in 6 years did his enemies discover his location or new identity. He watched them through surveillance networks, monitored their desperate attempts to recover, and methodically closed every door they tried to open. His new corporation grew quietly but steadily, absorbing vulnerable assets from his former enemies' failed ventures. Each acquisition was legal, logical, and completely untraceable to him. He wasn't just destroying their present. He was using their resources to build his future. The conspirators never realized they were watching their own assets being used against them. They were too busy surviving. Guillermo took increasingly desperate consulting jobs. Sandy moved to progressively smaller apartments. Herman found his reputation so toxic that even startups wouldn't touch him. Patricia's attempts to leverage her former social status met with embarrassing failures. Through it all, Lawrence worked with mechanical precision. Each move was calculated, each consequence measured. He didn't act from emotion, revenge, serve cold, required patience and planning. He was building something greater than destruction. A legacy that would prove betrayal never pays. For 6 years, he was a ghost in the machine, an invisible hand of justice. His enemies looked over their shoulders, jumped at shadows, and slowly went mad trying to figure out why everything they touched turned to ash. But Lawrence knew something they didn't. This was just the prelude. The real endgame was still to come. The security cameras caught Patricia's arrival at 9:47 a.m. 6 years had not been kind to her. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by off-the-rack wear that tried too hard to look expensive. Her once perfect hair showed streaks of gray, and her makeup couldn't quite hide the lines of bitterness etched into her face. She clutched the hand of a small boy, 5 years old, dark-haired, with Herman's distinctive nose. The child looked around with nervous curiosity as Patricia approached the front desk of the towering glass building that housed Nova Technologies, Lawrence's new empire built from the ashes of his enemies' ambitions. "I need to see Lawrence Sullivan," Patricia announced, her voice carrying the same entitled tone she'd used at the gala 6 years ago. "Tell him his wife is here." The receptionist, already briefed for this moment, replied with practiced neutrality. "I'm sorry, ma'am. There's no Lawrence Sullivan here." "Ex-wife," Patricia corrected, fumbling in her purse. "And I know he's here. This building, this company, it's all his. The boy, he needs to meet his father." Security cameras tracked their movement through the lobby. In his office 60 floors above, Lawrence watched the scene unfold on his monitors. DNA test results were already open on his tablet, tests he'd arranged months ago through his surveillance network. The boy's genetic profile was displayed next to Herman's, a 99.9% match. "She's getting desperate," Chris observed from his position by the door. "Trying to claim paternity after 6 years?" Lawrence's lips curved slightly. "Herman knows about the boy. He abandoned them both 3 years ago. My sources confirmed he's been dodging child support through shell companies. The trust you set up for the kid has been covering their basic needs," Chris added. "Though Patricia's been neglecting him despite the support. We have documentation of missed doctor's appointments, unexplained absences from school." Lawrence nodded. Everything was proceeding exactly as he'd predicted. Patricia's attempt to leverage a non-existent paternity claim would become yet another weapon in his arsenal. "Sir," his assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Mrs. Black is becoming insistent." Lawrence pressed a button, and security footage showed Patricia growing increasingly agitated in the lobby. "You tell Lawrence that Thomas is his son," she demanded, her voice rising. "We were together that last night before he disappeared. He has responsibilities." The boy, Thomas, shrank away from his mother's outburst, displaying a practiced familiarity with her episodes. Lawrence's surveillance had documented dozens of similar scenes. Patricia's public meltdowns, her neglect of the child, her attempts to use him as leverage against both Herman and Lawrence. "Show them up," Lawrence commanded. "It's time to end this particular charade." 10 minutes later, Patricia burst into his office, dragging Thomas behind her. She froze at the sight of Lawrence behind his desk, looking barely a day older than when he'd vanished. Success had preserved him, while failure had ravaged her. "You've been here all along," she whispered. "Right under our noses." "Sit down, Patricia," Lawrence said calmly. "We need to discuss Thomas's future. Specifically, why you've been neglecting the child support payments Herman's sister Ronnie sends for him." Patricia's face went white. "How did you?" "I've been watching. I've watched you waste the support money on failed get-rich-quick schemes. I've documented every missed parent-teacher conference, every skipped medical checkup, every time you left him alone while you chased dead-end leads trying to find my fortune." He turned his tablet around, showing her the DNA results. "Thomas isn't mine, Patricia. But unlike his actual father, I've been ensuring he has food, shelter, and education through the trust one established. The same trust you've been misappropriating. You can't prove." "I can prove everything." Lawrence pressed a button, and screens around the office lit up with surveillance footage, financial records, and medical reports. "The question is, what happens next?" Thomas, forgotten by his mother in her shock, had gravitated toward a corner of the office where a familiar red dress hung in a frame. He stared at it with innocent curiosity while his mother's last desperate gambit crumbled around him. 1 week later, 5 separate town cars arrived at Nova Technologies headquarters. Each carried a passenger who'd received an invitation they couldn't refuse. Herman Black emerged first, his designer suit a cheap knockoff of his former wardrobe. Bankruptcy had left him desperate enough to walk into what he suspected was a trap. Guillermo Sullivan followed, wearing the uniform of the security company where he now worked as a middle manager. 6 years of orchestrated financial disasters had stripped him of everything except his bitter resentment. Sandy stepped out next, clutching a briefcase containing legal papers about her pending criminal charges. Her once confident stride had been replaced by nervous glances over her shoulder. Jared Norton arrived fourth, his immunity deal crumbling under the weight of new evidence. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by the haunted look of a man watching his carefully constructed lies unravel. Patricia entered last, still reeling from her failed paternity gambit. She'd received custody papers that morning. Herman's sister Ronnie was suing for custody of Thomas, backed by extensive evidence of neglect. The lobby directory listed their destination as Conference Room A, special board meeting. None of them noticed that each guard, each receptionist, each person they passed had been specifically chosen for this day. Lawrence watched their approach on his monitors. Beside him stood his inner circle, each prepared for their role. Mandy, now 24, had grown into a formidable cybersecurity expert. Her tablets displayed years of surveillance data on her mother's activities. Bill, fresh from law school, carried files documenting every aspect of Guillermo's crimes. His uncle's betrayal had shaped his understanding of corporate law. Brooke, promoted to COO, held evidence of Sandy's corporate espionage, every stolen patent, every secret deal, every hidden transaction. Chris maintained his position by the door, ready to present proof of Herman's multiple betrayals. Claudia Martinez, corporate counsel extraordinaire, stood ready with documentation of their collective conspiracy. The conspirators entered the conference room separately, each trying to avoid eye contact with the others. The room's design was deliberate. A long table with high-backed chairs facing a massive screen, currently dark. "Please, be seated," a familiar voice commanded from hidden speakers. The screen lit up, showing Lawrence in his office. But before anyone could react, the conference room's doors opened. Lawrence walked in. The real Lawrence. The screen had been a misdirection, a final reminder of how easily they'd been manipulated. 6 years, he said, taking his place at the head of the table. 6 years of watching you destroy yourselves with your own greed and stupidity. "You bastard." Herman started to rise, but Chris's hand on his shoulder forced him back down. "Interesting choice of words, Herman," Lawrence replied, "especially given how you abandoned your own son." Patricia flinched. Guillermo's security guard uniform suddenly felt too tight. Sandy's fingers trembled on her briefcase. "Today isn't about revenge," Lawrence continued. "It's about justice, about consequences, about truth." He nodded to his team. Mandy stepped forward first, her tablet projecting onto the screen. Mother, would you like to explain these recordings? The ones showing how you deliberately sabotaged my relationship with Dad. Patricia's face drained of color as her own voice filled the room, carefully orchestrating conflicts, manipulating events, poisoning her children against their father. Bill followed with his presentation. Uncle Guillermo, the federal authorities are very interested in these transaction records. But they're especially interested in what you did with the money. One by one, they presented their evidence. Brooke exposed Sandy's corporate espionage, including emails proving she'd stolen patents before they were even filed. Chris detailed Herman's betrayals, complete with surveillance footage of meetings with competitors. Claudia presented proof of their collective conspiracy, revealing how each person's actions connected to create a complete picture of betrayal. But it was Lawrence's final revelation that shattered their last hopes. "Your immunity deal, Jared," he said, turning to Norton. "Did you really think I wouldn't find the evidence you held back? The real records of your involvement?" Norton's face went ashen. His immunity deal had been based on full disclosure. The evidence Lawrence now displayed proved he'd lied to federal investigators. The justice Lawrence had orchestrated fell like dominoes, each piece triggering the next with mechanical precision. Herman was the first to break. When faced with Chris's evidence of his corporate fraud, not just the affair with Patricia, but years of selling company secrets, his facade crumbled. "I want to make a deal," he blurted out, earning disgusted looks from his co-conspirators. "The time for deals is over," Lawrence replied. "Federal agents are already processing your involvement in industrial espionage. The evidence has been verified by 3 independent sources." Guillermo tried a different approach. "Brother, please. You lost the right to call me brother when you chose to steal from your own family." Lawrence cut him off. "However, the DA is willing to discuss a plea deal. In exchange for your complete testimony." Guillermo's shoulders slumped. The security guard uniform he wore suddenly felt like a preview of his future prison attire. Within an hour, he'd signed a full confession, detailing every ghost project, every stolen dollar. Sandy's collapse was more spectacular. As Brooke methodically presented evidence of her corporate espionage, her industry contacts were simultaneously receiving detailed documentation of her crimes. By sunset, she'd be blacklisted from every major tech company in the country. "You can't do this," she whispered. But her protest sounded hollow even to her own ears. "I already have," Lawrence replied. "Your new company's assets are being seized as we speak. The patents you stole are being returned to their rightful owner." Jared Norton's immunity deal crumbled under the weight of newly revealed evidence. His attempted betrayal of his co-conspirators had backfired spectacularly. Lawrence had known about his hidden records all along, waiting for the perfect moment to expose them. "The federal prosecutors are particularly interested in the evidence you conveniently forgot to mention," Lawrence informed him. "Immunity deals require full disclosure, Jared. You should have read the fine print." But it was Patricia's fate that proved most fitting. As the others faced their legal consequences, she watched her last claims to Lawrence's fortune evaporate. Every attempt she'd made to access his wealth over the past 6 years was exposed as the desperate grasping it had been. "The boy," she tried one last time. Thomas needs stability," Lawrence interrupted. "Which is why I'm supporting Ronnie's custody petition. Herman's sister has proven to be the only adult in his life who truly cares for his welfare." The resolution moved with swift efficiency. Herman was led away by federal agents, his corporate fraud charges carrying a minimum 10-year sentence. Guillermo signed his plea deal, accepting a lesser sentence in exchange for his testimony. Sandy watched helplessly as her industry contacts abandoned her, her reputation destroyed beyond repair. Jared's immunity deal was officially revoked, multiple indictments following within hours. Patricia lost her final appeal for Lawrence's assets, her claims dismissed with prejudice. But Lawrence wasn't finished. As his enemies faced their fates, he turned his attention to the innocent caught in their web. Thomas, Herman's abandoned son, was placed in Ronnie's custody. Lawrence ensured the boy would have everything he needed: education, support, and most importantly, stability. The trust he'd established would guarantee Thomas never suffered for his parents' sins. "Your actions forced me to destroy your world," Lawrence told the assembled conspirators. "But unlike you, I protect the innocent." Thomas will have every opportunity you tried to steal from my own children." As security led them away, Lawrence stood at his office window, watching the sun set over his rebuilt empire. Behind him hung the red dress that had started it all, no longer a symbol of betrayal, but a reminder of justice served. 1 year later, Lawrence sat in that same office, surveying what his revenge had built. The company had grown stronger than ever. Mandy headed the cybersecurity division, her insight shaped by watching her father's strategic brilliance. Bill ran the legal department, his understanding of corporate law deepened by documenting his uncle's crimes. Brooke served as COO, her loyalty rewarded with the position she'd earned. Chris directed global security operations, his protectiveness extending to the entire Sullivan empire. Claudia's position as chief corporate counsel was untouchable, her handling of the conspirators' downfall legendary in legal circles. Meanwhile, the conspirators lived with their consequences. Herman served his time in federal prison, his corporate fraud conviction ensuring he'd never work in business again. His attempts to appeal fell flat, each rejection citing the overwhelming evidence against him. Guillermo worked night shifts as a security guard, his plea deal leaving him just enough freedom to survive, but not enough to thrive. His former wealth and status existed only in his bitter memories. Sandy lived in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, blacklisted from the corporate world she'd once navigated so confidently. Her attempts to rebuild her reputation met with closed doors and turned backs. Jared faced multiple indictments, his legal troubles mounting as more evidence of his deception came to light. His immunity deal's collapse had triggered a domino effect of legal consequences. Patricia, her society status destroyed, worked as a retail clerk in a mall department store. Her former friends crossed the street to avoid her. Her attempts to rebuild her social standing failed repeatedly, her name now synonymous with betrayal in San Francisco society. The red dress hung in Lawrence's office, framed behind bulletproof glass, a reminder that justice, properly served, required not just vengeance but wisdom. His new wife, Amanda Troy, who had helped expose the conspiracy's financial threads, understood its significance. Their blended family, including Thomas, whom Lawrence mentored from a careful distance, represented his true victory. Revenge, Lawrence had learned, wasn't just about punishment. It was about protecting the innocent and ensuring karma found its true targets. As he watched his family and loyal friends celebrating the company's anniversary, he understood that the best revenge wasn't just destroying his enemies. It was building something stronger from the ashes of their betrayal. The power of patient, calculated response to betrayal had proven absolute. Every character's fate felt earned, every resolution complete, every loyalty rewarded. Justice, served cold but served completely, had prevailed. Epilogue. Patricia Black, formerly Sullivan, stared at her reflection in the employee bathroom mirror of Carson's department store. At 52, the careful maintenance of her appearance had become an obsession, a desperate attempt to cling to her former glory. The employee discount barely covered her basic cosmetics, and her monthly paycheck as a sales clerk couldn't sustain even a fraction of her former lifestyle. Her studio apartment, a far cry from the Sullivan mansion, sat above a Chinese restaurant in a forgotten corner of San Francisco. The constant smell of cooking oil served as a daily reminder of her fall. Her wedding rings, both from Lawrence and her brief, disastrous marriage to Herman, had been sold years ago to cover legal fees. Every attempt to rebuild her social standing had failed spectacularly. 3 charity organizations had publicly rejected her volunteer applications. Former friends blocked her calls and social media accounts. Country clubs cited membership restrictions when she attempted to join. Even her mother's bridge club had quietly asked her not to attend their annual fundraiser. Her relationship with Thomas, now 11, existed solely through court-mandated supervised visits twice a month. Ronnie, Herman's sister, had won full custody 5 years ago, backed by Lawrence's meticulous documentation of Patricia's neglect. The trust Lawrence had established ensured Thomas attended the best schools and had every opportunities Patricia could no longer pretend to provide. Herman Black's fate proved equally fitting. Federal prison Camp Montgomery had stripped away his arrogance along with his freedom. His 7-year sentence, reduced from 10 for cooperation, offered ample time to reflect on his choices. His cellmate, ironically, was a former hedge fund manager who'd lost everything to one of Lawrence's market corrections. The consequences of their betrayal continued to unfold. Patricia's attempts to write a tell-all book were shut down by ironclad NDAs. Herman's appeals were rejected with increasing finality. Their joint assets had been seized and liquidated. Their reputations were so thoroughly destroyed that even their failures made no news. Lawrence's new headquarters dominated the San Francisco skyline, a testament to patient revenge and calculated reconstruction. The Nova Technologies logo gleamed against the morning sun, while inside, the fruits of loyalty flourished. Mandy Sullivan, now strategic director of cybersecurity, had transformed her father's security protocols into an industry standard. Her department's innovations, born from watching Lawrence's methodical dismantling of his enemies, regularly set new benchmarks in digital protection. At 29, industry publications already called her the next generation of security evolution. Bill Sullivan's legal department had become legendary for its precision. His understanding of corporate law, shaped by documenting his uncle's downfall, made him uniquely qualified to protect the company's interests. His recent marriage to the daughter of a Supreme Court justice had added another layer of influence to the Sullivan legacy. Brooke's promotion to COO proved Lawrence's eye for talent. Her management style, learned from years of watching him operate, combined efficiency with strategic insight. The board's unanimous support of her leadership reflected the company's strongest quarter in history. Chris expanded global security into an independent subsidiary, providing specialized services to select clients. His loyalty to Lawrence had been rewarded with partial ownership of the new venture, though he still personally oversaw the Sullivan family's security. Claudia Martinez's position as chief corporate counsel came with a corner office and a view of the Bay. Her handling of the conspirators' downfall had become a case study at leading law schools, though the full details remained sealed. Lawrence's marriage to Amanda Troy brought more than personal happiness. It united two powerful families with complementary strengths. Her financial expertise had helped trace the conspiracy's money trails, and her understanding of loss, having lost her first husband to the conspirators' machinations, gave her unique insight into Lawrence's motivations. Their blended family thrived. Amanda's teenage daughters excelled under Mandy's mentorship. Thomas, though not officially part of the family, received carefully structured guidance. The Sullivan name once again represented integrity and innovation. Their regular family dinners became a symbol of victory over betrayal. The company's success exceeded even Lawrence's calculations. Nova Technologies absorbed key markets from competitors, strategic acquisitions strengthened their global position, innovation patents secured their technological lead, stock values tripled under the new leadership. Lawrence maintained discreet surveillance on his former enemies, not from fear or obsession, but as a matter of principle. Their continuing struggles served as data points in his understanding of justice. Patricia's attempts at redemption, failed interviews for better positions, rejected applications for loans, unsuccessful efforts to contact Thomas outside approved visits, declined submissions to society magazines about her psi. Herman's prison existence, declined requests for parole, failed attempts to publish business insights, rejected appeals for sentence reduction, growing isolation as former contacts abandoned him. The red dress, still framed in Lawrence's office, had acquired almost mythical status among employees. New hires learned quickly not to ask about it directly, but its story, carefully curated versions of it, circulated as a warning about betrayal and a testament to loyalty. Lawrence's revenge hadn't just destroyed his enemies. It had built something greater, a corporate culture that valued loyalty above all, a family strengthened by overcoming betrayal, a legacy secured for generations, a reputation for patient, absolute justice. Thomas, unaware of his full connection to events, was thriving under Ronnie's care. The trust Lawrence established ensured he would have every opportunity to build his own legacy, untainted by his parents' choices. In the end, Lawrence's patient vengeance had transformed betrayal into foundation stones for a stronger future. The conspirators' fate served as a perpetual reminder. Karma comes not as swift lightning, but as the inevitable tide, rising slowly but absolutely, drowning those who mistake patience for weakness. The Sullivan name endured, stronger than ever. While those who had tried to destroy it lived on as cautionary tales, their falls as complete as their betrayal had been profound. Lawrence kept only one photo from his previous marriage, Not for sentiment, but for perspective. It showed Patricia in the red dress at the gala, celebrating what she thought was her triumph. Beside it, quarterly reports showed Nova Technologies' continuing dominance, each success another stone in the edifice built from his enemy's destruction. Perfect revenge, Lawrence had learned, wasn't just about destroying enemies. It was about using their destruction to build something they could never taint, never touch, and never comprehend. A legacy of justice served cold, complete, and without regret.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Cheating Tales Lab. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know, what part of the world are you watching from right now? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the immaculately manicured lawn of the Harmon estate in the Hamptons. Seth Harmon stood at the edge of his limestone patio, a crystal tumbler of scotch in his hand, watching the army of event staff putting final touches on what would be his daughter Grace's engagement celebration. At 52, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a self-made man who had built Manhattan's most prestigious construction firm from nothing but grit and vision. "Dad," Grace's voice carried across the lawn. She was radiant in a champagne-colored dress, her dark hair swept up elegantly. "The florists want to know where to place the additional arrangements." Seth smiled, gesturing toward the garden entrance. "Whatever your mother planned, sweetheart. This is your day." Bridget Harmon emerged from the house, her designer heels clicking against the limestone. At 47, she still turned heads, though Seth had begun noticing a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there when they'd first met. She surveyed the preparations with the precision of a military commander. "The Carmichaels just called," she announced, not bothering to look at Seth. "They're running late. I told them we're starting precisely at 6, whether they're here or not." She turned to Grace. "Darling, go check on the place settings. The staff can't seem to handle basic instructions." Grace hesitated, glancing at her father. Seth gave her a reassuring nod. "Go ahead. I'm sure your mother knows best about these things." As Grace walked away, Seth's son Marcus emerged from the house, already looking uncomfortable in his tailored suit. At 24, he was the spitting image of Seth at that age, though lacking the hunger that had driven Seth to success. "The Gleasons just pulled up," Marcus announced, adjusting his tie. "Paul said he has some documents for you to sign, Dad." Seth suppressed a frown. "Business can wait. This is your sister's day." "It's just a few signatures," Bridget cut in sharply. "Paul said it's routine property transfers. Better to handle it now before the guests arrive." Before Seth could respond, Claire, his youngest at 21, bounded down the patio steps. "Mom, Mrs. Patterson is asking about the seating arrangement again. She's insisting she can't be at table 6. Bridget's perfectly maintained composure cracked slightly. "That woman." She stalked off toward the tent, Claire trailing behind her. Paul Gleason's arrival was announced by the crunch of tires on the circular driveway. Seth watched his attorney of 15 years exit his Mercedes, briefcase in hand. Paul's wife Susan followed, carrying a wrapped package that was undoubtedly not just an engagement gift. "Seth." Paul's voice boomed across the lawn. He was tall, distinguished-looking, with carefully maintained silver hair and the kind of smile that had convinced hundreds of clients to trust him with their legal matters. "The place looks amazing." "Susan, doesn't it look amazing?" Susan Gleason, a quiet woman who had always seemed slightly afraid of her husband, nodded. "Wonderful. Simply wonderful." Paul clapped Seth on the shoulder, a gesture that had once felt brotherly but now struck Seth as slightly presumptuous. "Got those property transfers ready for your signature. Just routine stuff. Nothing that can't wait until after the party, of course." "Of course," Seth replied, noting how Paul's eyes darted briefly toward Bridget, who was now berating a waiter about champagne glasses. "Let's put the briefcase in my study for now." Inside Seth's study, Paul placed his briefcase on the mahogany desk with practiced casualness. "Really, Seth, it's just some standard papers. The Jensen property transfer, mostly. Maybe we could knock it out now, while it's quiet. Seth picked up a framed photo from his desk. Grace's college graduation, the whole family smiling. It felt like a lifetime ago. Paul, you've been my attorney for 15 years. More than that, you've been my friend. When did that change? Paul's smile flickered almost imperceptibly. I don't follow. You will. Seth set down the photo. Tonight's about Grace. We'll discuss business Monday. A flash of something annoyance? Fear? Crossed Paul's face before his professional mask slipped back into place. Of course. Family first, always. The study door opened, and Marcus entered. Uncle Paul. Dad, Mom wants to know if you're done in here. Guests are starting to arrive. Paul's entire demeanor shifted as he turned to Marcus, and Seth noticed how his son's posture changed subtly, becoming more deferential. Marcus, my boy, how's the legal internship treating you? It's amazing, Marcus gushed. The partners say I'm showing real promise. That's because you have a natural gift, Paul replied, his tone almost paternal. And good mentoring, of course. Seth watched this exchange with growing interest, filing away every nuance. We should head out. Grace will want photos soon. The garden party was in full swing as the sun began its descent, casting a golden glow over the gathered guests. Seth moved through the crowd, playing the role of proud father and successful businessman. He accepted congratulations, discussed market trends with fellow CEOs, and kept one eye on his family's movements. He noticed how Bridget seemed to always know where Paul was, how their paths crossed just slightly too often to be coincidental. He observed Marcus hovering near Paul's social circle, laughing too loudly at the older man's jokes. Claire, usually so focused on her phone, kept glancing between her mother and Paul with what looked like nervous excitement. Mr. Harmon? One of the waiters approached with a phone. There's an urgent call from the Beijing office. Seth excused himself from a conversation about property values and headed toward the relative quiet of the rose garden. The call was brief, a minor crisis that his team could handle, but as he ended it, voices carried through the meticulously trimmed hedges. Everything's going perfectly, Bridget's voice, pitched low but clear in the evening air. Seth moved silently closer to the hedge. Patient as ever, my love, Paul's voice, followed by the unmistakable sound of a kiss. We've been altering Seth's legal documents for years. The properties, the company shares everything's in our names now. Seth's hand tightened on his phone, but he remained still, controlled. 25 years of high-stakes business deals had taught him the value of waiting for all the information before acting. Dad's such an idiot. Marcus's voice joined them, and Seth's stomach clenched. Always so focused on his precious company, he never even noticed. Our real dad's so clever. The voice was Claire's, and the betrayal was complete. No one suspects anything. The Jensen property transfer is the last major piece, Paul said. Once Seth signs those papers tonight, everything will be legally bulletproof. Another year of careful maneuvering, and we can finally drop the act. I'm tired of playing the perfect wife. Bridget's voice dripped with contempt. Do you know what he said this morning? He actually thanked me for making our house a home, as if I haven't been plotting to destroy that home for years. Patience, darling. Paul's voice was smug, assured. Seth's brilliant with business, I'll give him that. But he never understood that true power comes from controlling the legal framework. Every contract, every property deed, every corporate document, I've been quietly altering them all. By the time he realizes what's happened, it'll be too late. What about Grace? Claire asked. She actually loves Dad. She might cause problems. Grace is too caught up in her own perfect little world to notice anything, Bridget dismissed. Besides, once everything comes to light, she'll have to choose between keeping her trust fund or staying loyal to her father. Money always wins. Seth heard enough. He moved silently back toward the house, his mind already calculating, planning. In his study, he accessed his private computer terminal, connecting to his estate's security system. The cameras had been his own addition 3 years ago, after a series of break-ins in the neighborhood. Bridget had complained about them being tacky, but had eventually given up trying to have them removed. The footage appeared on his screen: months of midnight meetings in the garden, Paul arriving late at night when Seth was away on business, his children sneaking documents in and out of his home office. Every betrayal captured in high definition. His phone buzzed text from his head of cybersecurity, responding to his urgent request. Multiple unauthorized access points detected in our system, all originating from PG's firm. Hundreds of altered documents found in backdated folders. Want me to lock everything down? Seth typed back. Monitor only. Document everything. Full report Monday. He stood at his study window, watching the party continue below. Grace was dancing with her fiancé, genuinely happy and unaware of the devastation brewing. Bridget was holding court with her social circle, playing the perfect corporate wife. Paul was chatting with board members, likely seeking more angles to exploit. Marcus and Claire moved through the crowd, carrying their secrets like badges of honor. Seth pulled out his phone once more, dialing a number he hadn't used in years. Marshall? Seth Harmon. Remember that favor you owe me? I need a forensic accountant's eyes on something. Discreetly. Yes, it's urgent. No, don't send anyone to the office yet. I'll have everything ready for you Monday morning. He ended the call and took a moment to straighten his tie, check his reflection in the window. The man looking back at him wasn't angry, he was focused, determined. They thought they'd been clever, using his own success against him, twisting his trust into a weapon. They were about to learn why Seth Harmon had survived every attempt to take down his empire over the past 25 years. The party continued below, his family's betrayal hidden behind smiles and champagne toasts. Seth straightened his shoulders and headed back to play his role, the unsuspecting victim, the fool they thought him to be. For now, Monday would come soon enough. Seth? There you are. Grace's voice caught him at the bottom of the stairs. Daddy, it's time for your speech. He hugged his daughter, the only honest thing left in his household. Of course, sweetheart. Can't keep our guests waiting. As Seth walked toward the garden, he passed Bridget and Paul standing slightly too close together. Their confident smiles flickered as he approached. Everything all right, Seth? Paul asked, his tone solicitous. You seemed distracted earlier. Never better, old friend. Seth's smile was genuine, though not for the reasons they assumed. Never better. Monday morning arrived with the precision of a well-orchestrated plan. Seth Harmon sat in his corner office on the 48th floor of the Harmon Tower, watching Manhattan stir to life below. The weekend's events had crystallized into cold determination, his mind clear and focused. His executive assistant knocked once before entering. Mr. Harmon, the State Bar Association's Ethics Committee is on line 1. And Marshall Summers arrived early. He's waiting in the conference room. Thank you, Janet. Hold all other calls. Seth picked up the phone, his voice measured and authoritative. Mr. Davidson? Seth Harmon. Thank you for taking my call on such short notice. The Ethics Committee chairman's voice crackled through the speaker. Your message mentioned evidence of serious misconduct by Paul Gleason. Given your position in the business community, we're treating this with utmost priority. I'm sending over documentation now. My team has compiled evidence of systematic document alteration, fraudulent transfers, and egregious breaches of attorney-client privilege. Seth's mouse clicked through files as he spoke. You'll find video evidence, digital forensics, and a complete audit trail. A pause on the line as Davidson received the files. Then, my God, this is extensive. Mr. Harmon, this goes beyond simple misconduct. This is criminal conspiracy. I'm aware. I trust the Bar Association will handle this appropriately. We'll convene an emergency panel immediately. Mr. Gleason's license could be suspended by week's end, pending a full investigation. Seth ended the call and strode to the conference room. Marshall Summers, forensic accountant extraordinaire, sat surrounded by laptops and documentation. At 60, with wire-rimmed glasses and a prosecutor's demeanor, he'd built his reputation by untangling the most complex financial frauds. Seth, Marshall stood, extending his hand. I've been reviewing the preliminary data since your call. This is sophisticated work. They've been building this trap for years. Show me. Marshall pulled up a series of diagrams on his laptop. Paul created a network of shell companies, all registered in your wife's maiden name or through proxy owners. Each time he handled a property transfer for your legitimate business, he created a shadow transaction. Seth studied the complex web of arrows and corporate entities. The Jensen property? That would have been the crown jewel. Marshall pointed to a highlighted section. Sign those papers, and ownership of your entire commercial portfolio would have shifted to their control within 6 months. Clean, legal, and virtually irreversible without proving fraud. Which is exactly what we're going to do. Seth's phone buzzed, a text from his head of cybersecurity. Full digital forensics complete. Found encrypted communications between PG and your wife dating back 5 years. All documented. Seth forwarded the message to Marshall. Add that to your evidence pile. I want everything ready for the board meeting at 2. The morning passed in a blur of focused activity. By 1:30, Seth's executive team had assembled in the main boardroom. Paul's usual chair sat conspicuously empty. Ladies and gentlemen, Seth began, standing at the head of the table, what I'm about to share will be disturbing. It will also explain why I've called for an immediate audit and termination of all contracts with Gleason and Associates. The presentation was methodical, devastating. With each revealed document, each played recording, the board members' expressions shifted from confusion to shock to anger. This exposure puts us all at risk, Gerald Matthews, head of legal compliance, stated flatly. Every contract Paul Gleason touched needs to be reviewed. Already in progress, Seth assured them. I've engaged Marshall Summers to lead the forensic audit. But there's more. He played the surveillance footage from his home, showing the midnight meetings, the conspiracies hatched in his own garden. Several board members visibly recoiled at the betrayal's personal nature. My God, Seth, Patricia Chun, his longest-serving board member, whispered. Your own family? Business first, Seth cut off any sympathy. I need unanimous board approval to sever all ties with Gleason and Associates and initiate legal proceedings. The vote was immediate and unanimous. Across town, Paul Gleason sat in his corner office, unaware of the approaching storm. His secretary buzzed through. Mr. Gleason? The State Bar Association is here. They say it's urgent. Paul straightened his tie, confident in his ability to handle any legal challenge. The confidence evaporated as 3 stern-faced committee members entered, followed by 2 forensic IT specialists. Mr. Gleason, the lead investigator began. We have evidence of serious ethical violations and potential criminal conduct. We'll need your computers and access to all client files. This is ridiculous, Paul blustered. On whose authority? We have documented proof of fraudulent document alteration, misuse of client trust accounts, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The investigator's voice was implacable. Your license is suspended effective immediately pending our investigation. Paul's law partners gathered in the conference room, watching through the glass walls as IT specialists began imaging his hard drives. Did you know about this? Thomas Reynolds, the founding partner, demanded of the others. Any of it? Heads shook in mute denial. He has to go, Reynolds decided. Now, before this takes down the whole firm. In the Hamptons, Bridget Harmon was holding court at her weekly tennis club luncheon when her phone buzzed. The text from Paul sent ice through her veins. Bar Association here. They know everything. Seth knows. Delete everything now. Her hand trembled as she set down her mimosa. Around her, her social circle continued their mindless chatter about renovations and summer plans. Bridget, her friend Catherine touched her arm. You've gone quite pale. I need to go. Bridget stood abruptly. Family emergency. She was halfway to her car when another text arrived, this one from Marcus. Mom, firm putting me on immediate leave. What's happening? Claire's text followed seconds later. Dad knows. Henderson Law School called about irregularities in my application. What do we do? Bridget's perfectly managed world was unraveling with terrifying speed. She tried calling Paul, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Her next call was to their private banker in the Cayman Islands. I'm sorry, Mrs. Harmon. The banker's accent was carefully neutral. Those accounts were closed last week. Mr. Gleason had full authorization. Bridget's manicured nails dug into her steering wheel. Paul had betrayed her. After all their careful planning, he'd taken the money and was probably planning to blame everything on her. Back at Harmon Tower, Seth received another update from his team. He allowed himself a small smile as he read the reports of Paul's suspension, the chaos at his firm, the freezing of offshore accounts. His phone lit up with Bridget's name. He let it ring through to voicemail. Grace appeared in his office doorway, her face pale but composed. "Dad, can we talk?" Seth gestured to a chair. His daughter sat, her engagement ring catching the afternoon light. Thomas's parents saw the preliminary bar association report, she said quietly. "They're concerned about the wedding. What do you want to do?" Grace met his eyes directly. "I want to know the truth. All of it." Seth pulled out a file and handed it to her. "Read it. Take your time. Then decide." As Grace read, her composed expression crumbled. "Mom and Paul. All this time? And Marcus and Claire knew?"
Yes.
"The engagement party. They were using it as cover to get you to sign those documents?"
Yes.
Grace's hands shook as she closed the file. "I'm postponing the wedding. Thomas understands. I can't celebrate while our family is torn apart like this." "You're not responsible for their choices," Seth said firmly. "I know." Grace stood, straightening her shoulders in a gesture so like her father's. "I'm going to call Thomas's parents myself. They deserve to hear it from me." Seth watched her leave, pride mixing with his cold anger. At least one of his children had inherited his integrity. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Harmon? Mr. Summers has the complete forensic report ready for your review. Send him in." Marshall entered with a thick binder and a grim expression. "It's worse than we thought. Paul wasn't just helping your wife steal from you. He was skimming from every account he touched. The man's been running a sophisticated fraud scheme across multiple clients." "Perfect." Seth's smile was shark-like. "Send copies to the Bar Association and the District Attorney's office." "Already done." "Seth." Marshall hesitated. "Your wife's involvement is extensively documented. This will destroy her." "She destroyed herself." Seth turned to the window, his reflection hard and clear in the glass. "She just doesn't know it yet." The rest of the week unfolded like a perfectly executed business plan. Paul's law partners, desperate to save their firm's reputation, voted to remove him completely. The Bar Association fast-tracked their investigation, uncovering more evidence with each passing day. Marcus found himself escorted from the law offices, his promising career evaporating as the scandal grew. Claire's acceptance to law school was rescinded pending an investigation into her role in the document fraud. Bridget's carefully cultivated social circle began to dissolve as details leaked. Her text messages became increasingly desperate. "Seth, we need to talk. Please let me explain. You're destroying our children's futures." He left them all unanswered. Paul tried calling an emergency meeting with his partners, but they refused to see him. His access cards were deactivated, his emails redirected, his name already removed from the firm's website. In a final act of desperation, Paul showed up at Seth's office unannounced. "Mr. Gleason is here." Janet's voice was professional but concerned. "He's quite insistent." "Send him in." Paul burst through the door, his usual polish cracking. "Seth, be reasonable. We can work something out." Seth continued reviewing documents, not bothering to look up. "Can we? Think about the children. Think about the scandal." Now Seth did look up, his eyes cold. "Like you thought about them when you were sleeping with my wife? When you were teaching my son how to commit fraud? When you were helping my daughter lie on her law school applications? It wasn't like that. Get out." Seth's voice could have frozen fire. "The next time I see you, it will be in court." Paul's face twisted with rage. "You sanctimonious bastard. You think you're so perfect, so above it all. Bridget came to me because you were always too busy with your precious company to notice her, and now I'm using that precious company to destroy you." Seth pressed his intercom. "Security, please escort Mr. Gleason from the building. Permanently." As Paul was led away, Seth received one final text from his head of cybersecurity. "Found it. Offshore accounts emptied last week. All money transferred to private account in PG's name only. Your wife got played." Seth allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. They had thought him a fool, too focused on business to see their betrayal. Now they would learn that business had taught him exactly how to handle traitors. The sun set over Manhattan, casting long shadows through Seth's office windows. In the growing darkness, he reviewed Marshall's final report, preparing for the next phase of his counterattack. There would be no compromise, no negotiation, no mercy. They had chosen their path. Now they would face the consequences. The State Bar Association's hearing room fell silent as the final verdict was read. Paul Gleason, once one of Manhattan's most respected attorneys, stood rigid as his career crumbled with each measured word from the Ethics Committee chairman. In light of overwhelming evidence of systematic fraud, document falsification, and gross violations of attorney-client privilege, this committee hereby orders the immediate and permanent disbarment of Paul Gleason. All documents bearing his signature over the past 5 years are subject to automatic review and potential nullification. Seth Harmon sat in the back row, watching his former friend's shoulders sag. His new legal team, headed by Alexandra Torres from Wagner and Mitchell, was already making notes on their tablets. "Every fraudulent transfer will be reversed," Torres whispered. "The disbarment gives us unprecedented leverage." Paul turned, his eyes meeting Seth's. The mask of sophisticated charm had cracked, revealing the desperate man beneath. Seth held his gaze, unmoved by the silent plea he saw there. Outside the hearing room, reporters clustered like vultures. Paul pushed through them, ignoring questions about client losses and criminal charges. His former law partners had already distanced themselves, settling with Seth rather than risk their firm's complete destruction. Seth's phone buzzed with a message from his forensic team. Found hidden partition on PG's laptop. Evidence of systematic embezzlement from his own firm. Sending details to DA's office now. The next few weeks unfolded with the precision of a military campaign. Seth's new legal team moved swiftly, leveraging Paul's disbarment to unwind years of fraudulent transfers. Properties, company shares, and assets flowed back into their rightful accounts. In their Hamptons mansion, Bridget received the divorce papers with trembling hands. Her attorney, a third-rate lawyer since no top firm would touch her case, looked grim. "Mrs. Harmon, I must be frank. The evidence against you is overwhelming. Mr. Harmon's team has documented your role in every fraudulent transfer. You're facing potential criminal charges." "But the offshore accounts," Bridget began. "Empty." The lawyer shuffled uncomfortable. "Mr. Gleason cleared them out last month. The funds were traced to a private account in his name, then disappeared." Bridget's perfectly maintained facade cracked. "That bastard. After everything we planned." "Mrs. Harmon," her lawyer cut in sharply, "I advise against finishing that sentence. Let's focus on damage control." Marcus and Claire sat in Seth's office the following day, both looking considerably less polished than usual. Marcus's designer suit couldn't hide his haunted expression. Claire's law school dreams lay in ruins. "Henderson Law has officially rescinded my acceptance," Claire said, her voice small. They said involvement in document fraud makes me unfit for legal education. The firm's ethics committee is reviewing my internship," Marcus added. "I'll never pass the character and fitness review for the bar exam now." Seth studied his children, seeing not the confident conspirators from the garden party, but 2 scared young adults facing the consequences of their choices. "You both made your decisions," he said evenly. "You chose Paul over your father. You helped destroy your family for a man who's probably halfway to Mexico by now." As if on cue, his phone lit up with a news alert. Disgraced attorney Paul Gleason spotted boarding private plane to Mexico City. Claire burst into tears. Marcus slumped in his chair. "Dad, please," Marcus began. "We were stupid. You thought betraying me was clever." Seth cut him off. "You thought Paul's plan was foolproof. You thought wrong." He pulled 2 folders from his desk drawer. "These are the consequences of your choices. You can accept them, or you can earn a second chance." The siblings exchanged glances before opening the folders. Inside each was a detailed program. Ethics courses, community service requirements, and strict conditions for future education funding. "This is your one opportunity for redemption," Seth continued. "Complete these requirements, prove you've learned from this disaster, and I'll consider supporting your education again. Fail, and you're on your own." Grace knocked on the door, entering when Seth nodded. Unlike her siblings, she carried herself with quiet dignity. "The Hendersons send their regards," she said. "They understand postponing the wedding. Thomas still wants to move forward when the time is right." Seth allowed himself a small smile. You're the only one who maintained your integrity, Grace. I'm proud of you. Marcus and Claire couldn't meet their sister's eyes. Across town, Bridget's social circle was evaporating faster than summer rain. The scandal had spread through Manhattan's elite like wildfire, fueled by the salacious details of her affair and fraud. I simply can't seat you at the charity gala, Catherine, her former tennis partner, said over the phone. You understand, of course. The optics. One by one, invitations were rescinded. Country club membership temporarily suspended. Calls went unreturned. Then came the news that destroyed her last hope of salvaging anything from the wreckage. Paul had emptied their offshore accounts days before fleeing to Mexico. He played us all, she whispered to her reflection in the powder room mirror. The face that looked back was older, harder, stripped of its careful polish by betrayal and fear. Her phone buzzed with a text from Paul's Mexican number. Sorry, darling. Business is business. You understand. The same words she'd used to justify betraying Seth. Seth received the news of Paul's flight with characteristic calm. His security team was already coordinating with Mexican authorities, tracking Paul's movements through camera footage and financial transactions. He's staying at a luxury resort in Cabo, his head of security reported. Living large on the stolen funds. Not for long, Seth replied. Contact our friends at the FBI. Remind them about those wire fraud charges. 1 month later, Paul's Mexican paradise crumbled as federal agents surrounded his beachfront villa. The extradition process began immediately, fueled by the mountain of evidence Seth's team had compiled. Back in New York, the divorce proceedings moved forward with ruthless efficiency. Bridget's attempts to secure a favorable settlement collapsed under the weight of Seth's evidence. Mrs. Harmon, the judge stated firmly, given your documented role in this conspiracy, you're fortunate we're only discussing civil matters today. The criminal charges are another matter entirely. Bridget left the courthouse with nothing but a modest settlement, enough to maintain an apartment in Queens, far from her former social circles. Her phone remained silent, former friends too busy distancing themselves from her disgrace. 1 year later, Seth stood at the window of his expanded office in the renamed Harmon International Tower. The scandal had ultimately strengthened his empire, his ruthless handling of the betrayal becoming a legend in business circles. Grace entered, looking happy and centered. Her wedding plans were back on track, stronger for the delay. The Foundation's first ethics symposium is next week, she reminded him. The law schools are particularly interested in using our case study. Seth nodded. The Harmon Foundation for Corporate Ethics had emerged from the ashes of betrayal, turning personal pain into professional purpose. How are Marcus and Claire progressing? Claire's community service at the legal aid office is changing her perspective, Grace reported. Marcus, he's struggling with the ethics courses, but he's trying. I think they finally understand what they lost. And your mother? Grace's expression hardened slightly. Living in Queens, working as a receptionist. Paul's guilty plea didn't help her social rehabilitation. The news had broken that morning. Paul Gleason, extradited from Mexico and facing overwhelming evidence, had pleaded guilty to multiple felony charges. His attempt to blame everything on Bridget had backfired spectacularly when Seth's team revealed the embezzlement from his own firm. Seth turned from the window, studying the empire he'd built and defended. The betrayal had cost him a wife and 2 children, but he'd emerged stronger, wiser, and more respected than ever. Trust must be earned, he murmured, remembering the garden party that had started it all. And betrayal must be answered with the full force of the law. Grace touched his arm gently. You taught us all that lesson, Dad. Some of us learned it better than others. Seth allowed himself a small smile. The price of justice had been high, but he'd paid it without hesitation or regret. In the end, integrity had proven stronger than betrayal, truth more powerful than deception. The sun set over Manhattan, casting long shadows through the office windows. In the gathering darkness, Seth Harmon stood unchanged, unbowed, unbroken, and ultimately victorious. 5 years had passed since the scandal that shook Manhattan's elite circles. The Harmon International Tower still dominated the skyline, its gleaming facade a testament to Seth Harmon's resilience and power. At 57, Seth had not only recovered from the betrayal but had transformed it into an empire twice as strong. The Wall Street Journal's headline that morning read, Harman International acquires major European construction firm. Seth Harman's $4.8 billion deal cements global dominance. Seth read the article in his expanded office on the 50th floor, now occupying the entire level. The Harman Foundation for Corporate Ethics occupied 3 floors below, its programs having educated over 1,000 executives and law students about business integrity. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Harman, Grace is here with the wedding venue photos. Grace entered, now a poised 30-year-old woman who had become her father's trusted advisor while maintaining her own successful career in corporate compliance. Her wedding to Thomas, delayed but not destroyed by the scandal, was finally approaching. The Southampton venue is perfect, she said, spreading photos across his desk. Small, elegant, family only. She paused. I haven't invited Mom. Seth nodded. The mention of Bridget no longer carried any emotional weight. Their paths had diverged completely after the divorce, her fall from grace as total as his rise had been meteoric. Have you heard the latest about her? Grace asked carefully. Seth raised an eyebrow. You know I don't follow that part of our history. She's working as a receptionist at a small dental office in Queens, living in a 1-bedroom apartment, using her maiden name. Catherine ran into her at a discount grocery store last week. Said she looked old. The mighty Bridget Harman, once the queen of Manhattan society, had found her new level. Her attempts to rebuild her social connections had failed spectacularly. Every door that had once welcomed her remained firmly closed, her former friends treating her like a cautionary tale. Her last attempt at social redemption had come 2 years ago, when she tried to join a charitable organization in Queens. The background check had revealed her role in the fraud scheme, and her application was quietly rejected. Paul Gleason's fate had been even more dramatic. After his extradition from Mexico and subsequent guilty plea, he'd been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. His disbarment was permanent, his reputation destroyed, his assets seized. Seth's sources reported that Paul was not adapting well to prison life. His refined manners and arrogance made him a target. The man who once commanded respect in Manhattan courtrooms now spent his days in protective custody, his only visitors being his increasingly frustrated legal team. Did you see the notice from the Bar Association? Grace asked, pulling out her tablet. They're using Paul's case as required reading for ethics certification. The Harman Foundation actually contributed to the curriculum. Seth allowed himself a small smile. Justice had its own poetry. Marcus and Claire had taken different paths after their fall from grace. Marcus, after completing the mandated ethics courses and community service, had abandoned law entirely. He now worked in construction management for one of Seth's subsidiaries, starting from the bottom and slowly earning respect through actual work rather than nepotism. Marcus called. Grace mentioned. His team completed the Boston project under budget. He's actually good at this, Dad. Better than he ever was at law. Claire had taken longer to find her way. The rescinded law school acceptance had shattered her confidence, but the required volunteer work at Legal Aid had given her a new perspective. She now ran a nonprofit helping white-collar crime victims, funded partially by the Harman Foundation but operating independently. Claire's organization is partnering with 3 more universities, Grace continued. She's turned her mistake into something meaningful. Their redemption had been hard-earned. Seth had maintained strict conditions on his renewed support, total transparency, regular ethics training, and clear performance metrics. They had learned that trust, once broken, could only be rebuilt through consistent action. The door opened again, and Alexandra Torres entered. She had become Seth's chief legal counsel after leading the team that dismantled Paul's fraudulent empire. The European acquisition is complete, she reported. And you'll appreciate this, we just acquired Paul Gleason's old law firm's building. Their partners finally accepted our offer. The irony was exquisite. Paul's former law partners had never recovered from the scandal. Their once prestigious firm had imploded, torn apart by internal investigations and client departures. The building would be renovated and turned into the Harman Foundation's new headquarters. Have the foundation send them an invitation to our next ethics symposium, Seth suggested, his voice carrying a hint of satisfied amusement. Alexandra smiled sharply. Already done. They declined, citing prior commitments. A text message appeared on Seth's phone from his head of security, who still maintained surveillance on key players from the scandal. BH attempted to access her old country club membership, claimed it was a misunderstanding when rejected. Left in tears. PG requested prison transfer again. Denied. Claims harassment from other inmates who lost money in his schemes. Seth archived the message without comment. Their suffering held no pleasure for him. It was simply the natural consequence of their choices. Thomas Henderson, Grace's fiancé, arrived for their lunch appointment. At 32, he had proven his loyalty during the scandal, standing by Grace despite his family's initial concerns. Now a partner in his father's investment firm, he had earned Seth's respect through his integrity. Sir, Thomas greeted Seth warmly. The Foundation's impact report is impressive. Our firm is implementing the ethics training program company-wide. Over lunch in Seth's private dining room, they discussed the upcoming wedding. Grace had chosen to hold it in the same Hamptons estate where the betrayal had been discovered, a decision that spoke to her resilience. The rose garden has been redesigned, Grace mentioned. No more hedges. Seth nodded, remembering that night 5 years ago. The garden where he had overheard their conspiracy had been transformed into an open space filled with flowers. No more hidden corners for secret meetings. Later that afternoon, Seth visited the Harmon Foundation's offices. The walls were lined with case studies, including a detailed analysis of Paul Gleason's downfall titled The Price of Betrayal, Ethics, Trust, and Consequences in Corporate Law. The Foundation's executive director, a former federal prosecutor, updated him on their latest initiatives. We've had requests from law schools across the country. Your story has become the definitive case study in professional ethics. Any word from Henderson Law School? Seth asked, thinking of Claire's rescinded acceptance. They've adopted our full curriculum. Their dean specifically cited the Gleason case as a turning point in their ethics education. The day's final meeting was with his expanded board of directors. The company had tripled in size since the scandal, Seth's decisive handling of the crisis having attracted investors impressed by his integrity and strength. The European acquisition makes us the largest construction firm in the Western Hemisphere, his CFO reported. Our ethical business practices have become a major selling point. After the meeting, Seth worked late into the evening, reviewing reports and planning future expansions. His empire had been built on skill and transformed by betrayal into something even stronger. A news alert popped up on his screen. Former Society Queen Bridget Carlton, formerly Harmon, denied loan application. Sources say credit ruined by fraud charges. In her tiny Queens apartment, Bridget stared at her reflection in a cheap mirror, barely recognizing the woman she had become. Her designer clothes were long gone, replaced by off-the-rack basics. Her once perfect manicure was self-maintained, her hair showing strands of gray she could no longer afford to color professionally. Her phone, no longer the latest model, showed a message from her current lawyer. Petition to modify divorce settlement denied. Judge cited ongoing evidence of fraud participation. She had tried dating, but background checks in the digital age were thorough. Every potential relationship had ended when her past emerged. The wealthy men she had once attracted now avoided her like poison. In the federal prison's protective custody unit, Paul Gleason sat alone in his cell. The former attorney had aged decades in 5 years, his polished charm replaced by bitter anger. His appeals had been denied, his sentence upheld, his disbarment permanent. His last remaining asset, his elegant Manhattan apartment, had been seized and sold to cover victim restitution. The final insult. It had been purchased by a Harmon International subsidiary. Marcus visited the construction site of his latest project, proudly wearing a hard hat with his team leader badge. He had discovered a talent for actual work, earning respect through competence rather than connections. Mr. Harmon, his crew called him, none of them knowing or caring about his relationship to the company's founder. He preferred it that way. Claire hosted a seminar for fraud victims, her own experience lending authenticity to her guidance. Her organization had helped hundreds of families recover from white-collar crimes, her past mistake transformed into a mission. In the Hamptons estate, Grace reviewed wedding plans with her future mother-in-law, their relationship stronger for having weathered the scandal together. The Henderson family had come to admire her loyalty and integrity during the crisis, and in his office high above Manhattan, Seth Harmon watched the city lights emerge as evening fell. The betrayal that was meant to destroy him had instead revealed his true strength. His business empire was larger, his reputation stronger, his legacy secured. On his desk sat a framed quote, installed after the scandal: "Trust must be earned, but betrayal must be answered with the full force of the law." It had become the Harmon family's new motto, a reminder that integrity was not merely a virtue but a force that could reshape destinies. The betrayers had aimed to steal his empire. Instead, they had helped him build a dynasty. The sun set over Manhattan, casting long shadows through Seth's office windows. In the gathering darkness, he reviewed plans for his next acquisition. The past was settled, justice had been served, and the future stretched out before him, bright with possibility. Trust, once broken, could never be fully restored. But wisdom, earned through betrayal, could build something far greater than what was lost. Seth Harmon had learned that lesson well, and so had everyone who had ever underestimated him.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
My wife cheated on me under her sister's influence, we divorced, and fate delivered its own justice. The sound of dirt hitting the coffin had a muted tone, matching the gloomy day. I stood there observing as the minister tried to offer comforting words to those grieving. Holding my daughter's hand, her husband stood just behind us, placing his hand on my shoulder to offer solace. My son stood next to me with his girlfriend by his side. At 49 years old, I never anticipated that I'd be standing at a graveside burying my wife. I always believed, deep down, that I'd be the first to pass away due to my work and the way I had lived my life. I thought I'd surely pass before my wife, and when that time came, I'd be an elderly man. I felt old, ancient. After the funeral, there was a reception. Everyone came up to me, expressing their condolences and praising my wife's greatness, our wonderful relationship, and her youthful age. However, they didn't say what I needed to hear. We had been married for over 20 years, with 2 kids, both now independent. My daughter is married and about to give me my first grandchild. My son works in New York City in the financial district, and both are doing well. With many people at our house, well, I suppose it's now my house, I'm struggling to adjust to being single. For the past 20 years, everything has been ours, not mine. There were about 40 people around, talking and offering their support. I just wanted some time alone. Feeling quite fed up, I eventually slipped out into the backyard and made my way to the back gate, planning to take a short walk. As I closed the gate, someone drove up the alley and parked their car right next to where I was standing. It was Murray, my wife's younger sister, the last person I wanted to see at that moment. You see, I partly blamed Murray for my wife's passing away. Maybe that's not entirely fair to Murray or my wife, but in my heart, I knew that if Murray had kept her interests to herself, Brenda would still be here with me. I informed her that I was just going for a walk, mentioning that everyone was inside and that she had been brought up in conversation. I didn't smile, nor did I openly invite her. I just stated the facts as I saw them. I wanted to be away from there for sure, and I was certain Murray would try to invite herself on my walk. I should have known better, as she just brushed past me and went into the backyard. She had always been all about Murray. That's why, when Murray took a sudden interest in Brenda's personal life, I became suspicious. It was out of character for her younger sister in many ways. I sighed, relieved to be free of her for the moment. There was a cloud hanging between us and a divide that seemed insurmountable to me now. Family or not, Murray was unwelcome around me. It's a long story about what happened and how it all led to the funeral today. Life goes on like water in a river, always moving relentlessly forward. Okay, here is my story. This is what happened in my life. Brenda and I met after college at her workplace. I had gone to the insurance company where she worked to renew my home and car policies, and she was the agent assigned to me. I found myself finding excuses to go back after our first meeting, and somewhere along the way I finally gathered the courage to ask her out. After several months of dating, we realized we were deeply in love with each other, so we got married. We had 2 children and a happy marriage. Until 2 years ago, I never questioned marrying Brenda. We were perfectly matched, like 2 peas in a pod. Then Murray became interested in Brenda's life. I'm sure she had good intentions. I believe Murray thought Brenda needed to branch out and grow. Everything a person could desire in someone trying to be better and more loving could be seen in Murray. She had been trying hard to help Brenda with what she saw as flaws. It began with Wednesday night girls' nights out and soon expanded to include Wednesdays during the day and Fridays. Vincent got added to the mix. It seemed that after a while, Murray was spending more time with Brenda than I was. Of course, this was only true because Murray was taking advantage of Brenda's time when I would typically have been at home. Soon it was all about Murray, or Marie. When it became a daily occurrence, I started distancing myself from Brenda. Every time I tried to spend quality time with my wife, Marie seemed to be there. Whenever I wanted Brenda to be with me, Marie appeared more important. Every time I wanted to take Brenda out for dinner, it often coincided with one of the girls' nights. What had once been a communicative and open relationship became closed off and non-communicative. I couldn't express my feelings without upsetting Brenda and being accused of being hard and unfair to her younger sister. If all I was going to do was upset my wife by trying to be with her, why bother? A few months after the growing girls' night out trend began, I could see that my marriage was in serious trouble. Yet I couldn't discuss it with my wife without her becoming defensive and angry. So I did the worst thing possible. I gave up. I spent my time doing what I wanted, and Brenda started doing her own thing. On our rare nights at home together, we felt like strangers living in the same house. Then one night, or rather it started the night before, everything fell apart. I was at home working in the garage on a project. It was a Friday night, and Brenda and Murray had gone out for their regular Friday outing. They left the house around 6:30, and I found myself making my own supper, something I'd been doing more often. Eating in the garage seemed simpler, so I prepared dinner and took it out there. Listening to my boombox as I worked and ate was soothing. I worked until 11 and then went inside. I half expected Brenda to be in bed already, but I was surprised to find she hadn't even come home yet. I noticed the phone's light flashing, indicating a new message. The message conveyed that my wife was staying at Murray's for the night because they had been out for a while, and it was too late for her to drive home safely. She mentioned she would see me in the morning and questioned the point of bothering. I couldn't help but think to myself that I rarely saw her anymore anyway, and suggested that she move in with her sister and find happiness there. I had to admit I was upset and jealous. Murray's growing influence on my wife had led to my losing her, and I couldn't figure out how to win her back. I missed Brenda, our conversations, laughter, and the closeness we once shared. After listening to the message and deleting it, I overheard men's voices in the background. It seemed like a party was happening at Murray's house, with my wife there. I called Brenda's cell phone, but a man answered and mentioned she was occupied. He hung up when I told him I was her husband. I tried calling a few more times, growing increasingly frustrated. Eventually, I had enough and decided to drive over to Murray's. However, no one was home at her place. I then realized that I had dialed Brenda's cell phone, and I didn't know where she was or who she was with. I returned home, feeling angrier and more anxious than ever. I poured myself a drink and contemplated the situation. At some point, I assumed Brenda was making these choices on her own, and the police likely wouldn't intervene for another 24 hours. I even entertained the thought that Brenda had invited those men herself. My mind was playing tricks on me, and drinks only added to the confusion. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and dry mouth. I took a shower, got dressed, and grabbed a bottle of aspirin. After taking a few, I decided to take a few more to relieve my headache. In the mirror, I saw a man with a distressed, lost expression. After having a light breakfast, I waited around for either a phone call or Brenda's return. Around 2, Brenda arrived looking refreshed and wearing one of my favorite dresses, which she had only worn for special occasions. I asked her about her absence and the man who answered her cell phone. She sat down but missed the chair and ended up on the floor crying. I left for the garage, played loud music, and vented my frustration for hours. It became clear to me that Murray had caused the problems in my marriage. Before her involvement, Brenda and I were happy, but her influence had driven us apart. I feared that Brenda was seeking happiness or closeness with another man, or men. In the hours I spent in my shop, I came to the realization that I had probably lost Brenda for good. We were headed for a divorce. Going into the house, I found myself alone. Brenda had left, presumably for Murray's support. I went to our bedroom and was shocked to see Brenda's dresser drawers empty. I turned to online banking to protect my financial interests. I went online to figure out how to safeguard my assets, ensuring I wouldn't suffer financially after years of building a substantial savings in our bank account. Afterward, I reached out to a friend who had experienced a divorce, and we made plans to discuss Brenda and me. I informed our kids about our strained relationship and Brenda's possible departure. 1 week passed with me immersing myself in work to distract from my crumbling home life. By Saturday night, I was convinced Brenda had given up on us long before the previous week and was with someone else. I finally called Murray's house that night. She was surprised to hear that Brenda wasn't with me, as I had thought. She was still upset with me and staying close to home. Murray asked if I had seen Brenda at all, expressing her concern about the situation. I replied that I believed Brenda had left us. attributing it to the fact that she had been going out with Murray every Wednesday, Friday, and sometimes on other nights. I believed this had contributed to the breakdown of our relationship. I added that I thought Brenda might be with the guy who had answered her phone last Friday night. Murray acknowledged that she knew about that night. She recounted how Brenda had returned home on Saturday afternoon, looking as though she had made an effort, and had mentioned a strange guy answering her phone. Brenda had broken down in tears, and later when Murray came in from the garage, Brenda had packed her things and left. I concluded by blaming Murray for her part in the situation, saying that her actions had cost me my wife, and warning her never to come around me again. I just wanted to shut everything out. Her, Brenda, that other man, and life in general. Furious doesn't begin to describe my feelings or thoughts. Just hearing Murray on the phone was enough to set me off. I was angry all over again, angry and lost. My wife was off somewhere, and I had no way of fixing things. After shouting into the phone, I slammed it down so hard I broke the handset. Now, on top of everything else, I had to buy a new phone. It was a while before I decided to go to bed. As I got up, I noted that I'd been sitting right where Brenda had collapsed not so long ago. By morning, I figured I had lost out on sleep and would have been better off just staying up all night drinking. A dreary Sunday morning greeted me, and I wasn't in any mood to deal with anyone. Around noon, I heard a car pull up in our driveway. Looking out the window, I saw my son climbing out. My son questioned me about what had been happening, mentioning that his mother had come to his place a week ago, upset and crying. She wouldn't discuss anything other than the fact that I was going to leave her. I replied that I had informed him about our problems and clarified that Brenda had left me, packing her things and leaving. This was the first I had known of her whereabouts. He asked if this had been the case all along, to which I confirmed it. He inquired further about the situation, expressing concern and wondering if I intended to be rude with his mother. I explained that I had been exhausted and stressed, having had a week filled with worry and frustration. My son had to make a long drive on a Sunday just to seek answers and understand why his mother had sought refuge at his place and wouldn't let him contact me. He mentioned that his mother had gone out with Aunt Murray the previous week and explained what he knew, including the missed phone call and my apparent anger. He asked why I had reacted that way. I provided additional details, explaining that after Brenda's message, I had called her cell phone and heard strange voices in the background. I recounted the conversation I had with the unknown man who answered, and how he hung up on me after being informed that I was her husband. My son concluded that his mother had sugarcoated that part and asked if she had cheated on me. I admitted that I wasn't entirely sure what had happened, but Brenda had acted guilty about something. I hadn't spoken to her since Saturday afternoon, and I suggested that they needed to talk to each other. My son agreed to talk to his mother but expressed doubts about whether she would. He invited me to come to his place and talk to her, ensuring I left any weapons behind. He emphasized the importance of resolving the situation, and he would follow me home, assuring that I would get there safely. During the drive to my son's place, I realized that I still had some love for Brenda. Even if she had cheated on me, at that moment, I was willing to try to work things out with her. When we got to Mark's place, he parked, and we went in. Inside, his girlfriend was sitting with Brenda, and when I walked in, they both stood up, looking nervous. Brenda greeted me with a cautious, "Hi, Jeff, how have you been?" I felt my anger welling up as I wondered how she thought I had been. I started to lose control, barely managing to contain my anger in time. I blurted out, "How do you think I've been? You cheated." As I raised my voice, I noticed Brenda shrinking away from me. I had to pause and regain composure, saying, "I'm sorry. I've been okay, I guess. Drinking a bit too much lately. Confused about things, too." She appeared pale and anxious. The woman I loved, the woman I had spent most of my life with, was clearly apprehensive in my presence. It pained me deeply. My heart was breaking. I still held love for her, yet she feared me. I wondered if there was a chance to mend things. The young woman, presumably a guest, introduced herself as Jill and recognized me as Mark's father. She expressed a wish for better circumstances to meet. I shook her hand gently and responded, "Me too. I hope we can become better acquainted," although Mark hadn't told us about seeing anyone yet. I glanced at Mark with a subtle reprimand in my gaze. Jill suggested that Mark and she would give us some space to talk and offered assistance if things became difficult or noisy, citing the thin walls in the apartment building. Mark and Jill departed, leaving us to our own devices. I addressed Brenda, saying, "I suppose I need to explain things to you. Jeff, first of all, I'm so sorry. I really am," she said. I inquired if she had something to apologize for and questioned if she had been involved with another man. Brenda responded, "Not exactly." "I don't understand," I pressed further. "Not exactly. That's somewhat like being half pregnant, dear. It wasn't just one guy, and it wasn't just once." Her revelation was a heavy blow. I was truly shocked. Learning that she had been with more than one man was nothing I could have anticipated. It was as if the person I had married years ago had completely changed. I felt lost. I asked her if she had made these choices willingly, to which she responded, "Not exactly. I was drunk. I think I had way too much to drink that night. Murray had also been pushing me for weeks to get out. I don't know, maybe I was lonely too. I just don't know how it all came about, but suddenly, there I was on a bed with two men. Actually, it started with just one guy, but by the end, all of them were involved. Murray was there too. The enormity of her revelations hit me like a ton of bricks. I had expected to hear about her infidelity, but I hadn't anticipated multiple partners, nor had I imagined her and Murray being involved. They were sisters, for God's sake. I sat there in silence, not knowing how to respond. In just a few minutes, our conversation had ventured into her being with other men, and she didn't seem to be hiding anything from me. She must have sensed my inner turmoil. She offered, "I will tell you whatever you want to know, Jeff, if I can." Part of all that went on. I'm not sure how it came to be. I'm not sure when I became who I am now, though. I don't know what made me forget my wedding vows or my husband waiting for me at home. All I do know is that, at one point, I heard myself begging for more. "I'm a terrible person. I don't deserve you. I don't deserve to live." Her sobs overtook her, and she collapsed. I watched her struggling to recognize the person before me. I was too stunned to say anything. The situation was overwhelming, and I began to feel nauseated. As I provided an update, I mentioned that I had started to feel ill and even vomited. After calming down and taking a glass of water, I wiped my face and returned to the kitchen table. Brenda was in tears, crying softly. I wanted to comfort her, but I didn't know if things could ever be okay again. I sat down heavily, searching for the right words without getting sick again. I confronted her, asking, "So you and Murray's nights out were for scouting for men, then?" Brenda clarified, "No, that never happened before. We had gone to a new club. I told you that I had been drinking too much. Anyway, these guys were buying us drinks and dancing with us. They complimented us and made me feel beautiful and playful. Then the next thing I know, I called you and left the message that I was too drunk, and then we went to their place. Lately, I hadn't been paying attention to you." Frustrated, I raised my voice as she seemed to suggest that it was my fault. "Are you hearing yourself, Brenda? You're the reason. You and your sister, you haven't been letting me even try. I've tried to get you to go out with me, but you've been claiming that you and Murray needed to be together. Not only that, but you told me in the message that you were at Murray's. Brenda, you lied to me." Brenda explained, "No, at the time I thought we were going to Murray's, but the men wanted to take us to their place first, just for a minute, so one of them could pick something up, and we never thought it would be a problem. We ended up staying there, though. If only I hadn't thought. You should have paid more attention to me. I might have been better prepared to fend off what happened." I couldn't help but raise my voice again, feeling frustrated by her insinuation that it was my fault. "I haven't been paying enough attention to you lately? Again with that. God damn it, need I remind you that you've been the one ignoring me? You're the one who has been going out with Murray every Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday night. Always Murray this and Murray that. You've been pushing me away while taking up with her. To me, you're the one who has been pushing me out of your life." From the change in her eyes, it seemed like she suddenly realized she couldn't place all the blame on me for what she had done. Brenda acknowledged that she hadn't fully realized the extent of her actions until now. She admitted that I hadn't been paying much attention to her because she had been spending a lot of time with Murray, which had understandably upset me. Brenda clarified that she didn't enjoy being in this situation, even though I had previously expressed my frustration. She assured me that she had never labeled me as a derogatory term or treated me as such. She went on to explain that something within her had snapped that night, and she had discovered a newfound enjoyment in her experiences with those other men. The different tastes, textures, sizes, and combinations were intriguing to her. Brenda confessed that some of these experiences were things she had wanted to explore with me but hadn't been able to communicate. She realized that she had become deeply engrossed in this situation and had lost me in the process. Recognizing the gravity of her actions, she expressed a deep desire to make amends. Her eyes reflected a newfound hope as she offered to do anything to rebuild our relationship. Brenda wanted to remain married, stop going out without me, and be a devoted stay-at-home wife willing to meet any expectations I had. I expressed my concerns about her commitment, questioning whether she would revert to her previous behavior once things settled down. I pointed out how she had driven a wedge between us by spending so much time with Murray, causing me to feel ignored and avoided. I was bewildered by my own actions and why I had allowed this to happen. As my voice grew louder and anger bubbled up within me, Mark and Jill entered the kitchen, offering a timely intervention. Mark proposed that we take a short break, allowing me to vent to Jill while he and Brenda had a conversation. During our walk, Jill empathized with my anger and acknowledged my right to feel that way. She explained that Brenda genuinely felt remorse for her actions and the potential damage to our marriage. Jill believed that alcohol had played a significant role in the situation. I vented my frustration, expressing my strong desire to blame both Brenda and her sister Murray for the time they spent together and the drunken encounter they found themselves in. The resentment and anger I felt toward Brenda seemed overwhelming at that moment. Jill related a personal experience where her parents had faced a similar situation. Her mother had gotten involved with someone while out with friends, causing turmoil in her parents' marriage. Initially, Jill thought her father would be devastated or even angry enough to kick her mother out, but her parents had managed to work through their issues. I inquired about the current status of her parents' marriage, and Jill clarified that they had worked things out but had not necessarily stayed married. She emphasized that Brenda's actions were undoubtedly wrong on various levels, but insisted that it didn't mean she didn't still love me. Jill offered perspective on how alcohol and indulgence could lead to such mistakes, often involving lowered inhibitions and peer pressure. She acknowledged that Brenda had made a mistake, but it was crucial to move forward and address the issue. Jill also highlighted the contrast in our situations, where I had remained faithful without external influences interfering with my commitment. While walking and talking with Jill, my anger gradually subsided. Her soothing manner of speaking had a calming effect on me, and I found myself willing to try and work through the uncertain future with Brenda. With a faint attempt at a cheerful tone, I asked Jill if I could return to the conversation with Brenda, even though I was still grappling with the situation and trying to contain my anger. Driven by a sense of righteous indignation, Jill inquired about the state of our relationship before Murray began monopolizing Brenda's time. I admitted that, like most long-term couples, some of the initial magic had faded, but I believed we were doing relatively well. However, I acknowledged that I might not have taken Brenda out often enough, possibly taking her for granted. The presence of Murray had driven a wedge between us, making Brenda decline or get upset when I tried to spend time with her, leading to our gradual drift apart. Jill probed further, asking about the small gestures, like bringing Brenda flowers, spontaneous compliments, and making love. I clarified that our bed life was fine, but acknowledged that I might not have been as romantic as I should have been. Jill emphasized the importance of keeping the romance alive and that couples should keep each other close through small gestures. Feeling defensive, I raised the possibility that Jill might be taking Brenda's side. I argued that it wasn't entirely my fault and that Brenda had locked me out, even after she knew I was trying to make amends. I insisted that, despite my grievances, I had never considered being with another woman because I loved Brenda too much to betray her in that way. Jill encouraged me to go back and have a direct but calm conversation with Brenda. She reminded me of my own assertion that I loved Brenda too much to cheat on her. She advised me to talk things out, suggesting that love might rekindle, allowing us to move past this ordeal. Upon returning to Mark's place, I found Brenda clear-eyed and waiting for us. Brenda expressed uncertainty about our current situation, indicating her desire to be with me but questioning whether I would accept her. I inquired about what she meant, and she admitted to her infidelity, describing it as a one-time occurrence that would never happen again. Brenda acknowledged the need for us to address her unfaithfulness and rebuild trust. She asked if I could accept her realization of her wrongdoing and her sincere apologies, wondering if we could move forward from there. I conveyed my feelings to Brenda, explaining that her infidelity had hurt me deeply, especially given the circumstances in which it occurred. I mentioned that it was challenging for me to accept what had happened, particularly the involvement of multiple individuals, including her sister. I also shared my frustration with Brenda about my efforts to repair our relationship and how she had initially resisted giving me a chance. I admitted my own shortcomings, recognizing that I might not have put enough effort into our relationship. Brenda acknowledged her significant mistake and expressed remorse, admitting that she couldn't change the past and that all she could do was hope for my forgiveness and trust in the future. She understood that if the roles were reversed, it would be equally challenging for her. Brenda further explained that her actions that night were influenced by alcohol and the allure of a deep, dark fantasy, which she regretted deeply. She expressed her apologies for losing control. I then proposed the idea of a trial separation, which caused Brenda to shed tears. I noticed that she might have expected a more severe reaction from me. I admitted that I still loved her and didn't want to lose her without a fight. However, I also realized that harboring such negative thoughts could lead to revenge, which I wanted to avoid. Jill interjected and strongly advised against a trial separation, sharing her parents' experience as an example of how it often led to divorce. She suggested that we should separate within the same house, allowing us to work through our issues together. I appreciated the wisdom in Jill's words and the potential consequences of my thoughts and actions. I questioned whether I could let Brenda back into my life and how to deal with the anger I felt. Mark expressed concern about my anger and whether Brenda would be safe around me. I acknowledged my anger and potential for bad actions. Jill emphasized that based on her parents' experience, we needed to confront the situation together rather than separately. She recognized it wouldn't be easy, but suggested that trying to work things out within the same house might be the best way to determine the future of our relationship. I appreciated Jill's advice, but questioned whether she fully grasped the situation, and I needed time to consider our options. The week of separation had taken a toll on our relationship, and I didn't want to make a decision under pressure. I informed Brenda that I needed time to think and asked Mark to take her to a motel temporarily. I promised to give my decision the next morning. Upon my return the following day, I noticed that Brenda, Mark, and Jill appeared exhausted and somber. It was clear that none of them had rested. I knew I had to convey my decision. I suggested that Brenda should come home, albeit with a warning that I might get angry and raise my voice at times. I mentioned that we could work things out by staying in separate rooms within the same house, in our bedroom and a guest bedroom. Brenda seemed relieved but also apprehensive, and I could sense the shattered trust in our marriage. Brenda raised the idea of counseling, to which I responded that we could consider it, but we already had counselors in Mark and Jill. She clarified that she meant professional counseling, and I agreed that we should seek individual and couples counseling, starting the next day. As Brenda prepared to leave with me, she inquired about my car's location. Mark volunteered to get it from the local parking garage. To our surprise, Mark revealed that he had proposed to Jill, and she accepted. We welcomed Jill into the family and wished them happiness. We left for home together, the journey filled with silence and tension, and the subsequent week was marked by anxiety. We started counseling the following week. After 8 months of counseling, we decided to move forward on our own, having worked through the pain and nightmares of the past. One day, Brenda returned from the doctor with distressing news. She was seriously ill with cancer that had spread to various parts of her body. I tried to reassure her but couldn't shake her sense of dread. We now faced a new challenge dealing with Brenda's illness. Despite our efforts to remain positive, Brenda's health declined. When she passed away, she was surrounded by her children and me. I acknowledged my lingering resentment toward Murray and the time we lost. In the aftermath of Brenda's mistake, our preoccupation with that situation might have delayed the discovery of her cancer.